Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's full council meeting. I want to apologise for my slightly croaky voice right at the beginning, so bear with us. Agenda item 1, announcement by the Mayor and Chief Exec. Steve, do you have any announcements? No, thank you. I just want to mention that the key discussion item which Councillor Kendrick will be presenting needs to commence at 7 p.m. I will be, as always, calling for a break just before, at about 6:45. So is that okay? Brilliant, thank you. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence. Councillor Sokal.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Apology from Councillor Manir Ahmed and to my colleague Councillor Sheikullah and Afaq, but they're coming a bit late. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sokal. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Anthony Smith, unfortunately, will not be here tonight, and Councillor Kath Pinnock may be late. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have apologies of Councillor Armour, Councillor Bolt and Councillor Lees Hamilton. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Masood Ahmed.
Apologies from Councillor Abiban Zaman and Adam Zaman.
Thank you. Councillor Hanifa Darwan.
Apologies from Zaid Kahoot and Aziz Dadje.
Thank you. Councillor... Oh, that's it. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3. Minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the meeting of council held on the 11th of December 2024 be approved as a correct record. Is that seconded?
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. Can we please vote by a show of hands? That is carried. Item 4, declaration of interest. Members who have any disclosable pecuniary or any other interests which would prevent them from discussing or voting on any item should disclose their interests now. Are there any interests to declare? No, thank you. Item 5, petitions from members of the council. Are there any petitions? No, thank you. Item 6, deputations and petitions from members of the public. I understand we don't have any deputations this evening and there are no petitions either. Thank you. Agenda item 7, public question time. There are no public questions this evening. Agenda item 8, which is West Yorkshire Combined Authority minutes. These are to receive for information. The minutes are here for noting. Are there any comments or questions regarding the minutes? No, thank you. Oh, Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry to skid in on the last moment there. On the West Yorkshire Combined minutes, we've asked several times, and indeed directly of the Mayor when she came, about the adult education and the portion of that programme that was cancelled and is now underway, I guess, to be gone out to tender again. We understand that the bidders, the people who secured those contracts, have not been left out of pocket, which is good to know. However, how much does that total look like? And we've been trying to look for that figure now in a few meetings in a few different ways, and there's still no figure forthcoming. So I think we really, in Kirklees, we have a right to know. I think people have a right to know just how much that figure is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Councillor Pattison.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure that figure is actually even available, John. I mean, certainly it's not been put to the board I'll just have to go and ask some questions on your behalf for that. I'm sorry, I can't... I'm not quite sure what you mean by being out of pocket. I mean, if you're just talking about the expense they went to in putting their bid together, or whether you think they might have lost out on a bid and not able to rebid. So perhaps you can give me a little bit of clarity and then I'll find out for you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Are there any other comments? Supplementary?
So, thank you, Mayor. So, as I understand it, from the information we've had, some of the successful bids had already employed people, had already employed teaching staff, and it's those kinds of amounts of reimbursement. It's that nature. How much was given back, and where is the replacement coming from? Are we having to double up on that investment and draw that money forward again and spend it again? I think we need some clarity about what happened to that money.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the minutes? No? Okay. Moving on to agenda item 9, the proposed revision to statement of licensing policy 2025 to 2030. Councillor Eric Firth, you have 10 minutes, max.
I'll take one, Madam Mayor. I move that the Council adopts the revised statement to the licensing policy for the period 2025 to 2030. This comes to Council every 5 years by statute. There's very little changes, so I hope that will be seconded and we can move on.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Is that seconded? Councillor Marchington?
Second that and reserve the right.
Thank you. Right of reply? No one's really asked anything yet. Okay, we'll go straight to the vote, please. Does anybody have any comments? Sorry. Does anybody have any comments? No? Okay, we'll move straight to the vote. We'll vote electronically if that's okay. That's carried. Agenda item 10, which is the cumulative impact assessment for Huddersfield and Dewsbury town centres relating to premises licensed to sell alcohol with off sales only. Councillor Firth.
I move that the Council adopts the cumulative impact assessment policy as set out in Appendix 3, and that it be reviewed every 3 years in accordance with the requirements of the Licensing Act 203. The reason this is here today is because there's almost become a plethora of licences in our town centres, particularly in Huddersfield and Dewsbury, and the impact that has caused residents. This gives us a great measure of control for the future. It won't stop the present off licences. No, we do. No, we want to remove those, but it stops more coming unless we wish them to come. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Is that seconded? Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Firth, for introducing this. I think right to support the cumulative impact assessment as presented in the papers. I know over the years we've looked at alcohol-related antisocial behaviour in Huddersfield Town Centre, Dewsbury Town Centre, and also in back parts of Batley as well. And I think previous administrations worked on something called street drinking control zones or alcohol control zones, something like that. I think this is a step on from that. We didn't go into this lightly. It's been a thorough review of what's happening, and I felt that it's actually control over off licences within the town, both of the ring roads. is an appropriate step to do, and it won't sort everything out, as Eric has said, but it's a step in the right. It's a tool that the partnership can use, local authority, the police and other bodies, to actually make sure that our town centres, Dewsbury and Batley, are pleasant places for people to go and enjoy them. And it's not to stop. We know both of them have a thriving nighttime economy. It's about alcohol-related antisocial behaviour, and this is the step in the right direction. So it won't, as Eric said, it won't sort everything out straight away. We need to keep an eye on it, but it is a step towards, you know, we should have a greater look about what antisocial behaviour is going on. So I think fully encourage the council to fully support this, keep an eye on it. Either of those town centres to take an ongoing interest in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. Are there any comments on this matter? Councillor Masood Ahmed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to echo what Councillor Marchington and Councillor Eric Firth have just mentioned. Having read the report in relation to the impact the cumulative assessment has done in terms of Dewsbury and seeing the number of off-licence that are there currently at the moment, and Appendix 2 and 3 goes through quite a lot in detail about the response from 56% or 56% or 54% of people that have come out and said that there are too many off licenses. They don't want to come into town. There's too many people drinking. There's antisocial behaviour and other stuff that's going on in terms of that. So I welcome that, and I welcome the report as well as what members have come forward with today. Thank you for that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just again to welcome this. I'm a frequent visitor to Dewsbury, a lot more frequently than I visit Huddersfield. But it is a problem at the moment, is the antisocial behaviour fuelled by alcohol. I wish this well. I won't say anything against it because I think it's a necessary tool, but it's only going to work if our own enforcement enforces our existing policies about drinking on streets and antisocial behaviour, and also if the police also step up somewhere like the centre of Dewsbury to tackle some of the problems, because we do have intimidation. I've experienced it myself, and so has my family in the middle of Dewsbury. It's not pleasant, and sometimes Dewsbury can be a not pleasant place to be because of other people who are misbehaving. This, of course, is only one facet of that, but if it does help in any way to curb the use of alcohol in the streets in Dewsbury, that I'll be very, glad to back it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Cathy Scott, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome this. I think it's much needed, and it is a starting point. I was glad to read about the purple flag and about accreditations that we've done, but the main thing that worries me is about the enforcement, about a joined up approach with services. It's not a reliance on the council to deal with this. This is also law enforcement. And I, for one, in Dewsbury, often object to off-licences, and there's several that go through, and I'm pleading with councillors in this chamber today, put objections in, because we need to do something to cap this. And I also think that we need to find a way as a council to say, these are our blueprints in our town, this is what we're having, and we need to stop it. We tackled obesity with fast food shops. We need to do this with alcohol as well. So I think it's a starting point. It's a great way forward. I commend the administration for taking this forward, but I equally want to see more.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Paul Moore, please.
Is it on? Yeah, like Cathy said, we welcome this as Dewsbury councillors, but as somebody who goes into Dewsbury on a weekly basis, somebody who still drinks in Dewsbury, the amount of antisocial behaviour I see and report is unbelievable. It's not enforced. There's a lack of enforcement. We had people sat around a wheelie bin with a bottle of Jack Daniels in the middle and 4 glasses about 2 weeks ago. And the amount of antisocial behaviour linked to alcohol is quite disturbing. And you know you've got a problem when people in Kirklees say, I'm not going into Dewsbury. It's not safe. You know, Kirklees is a gritty estate, and if they're not going in, Dewsbury's got a real problem. So more enforcement, please.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Darwan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome what Eric's proposed. It's a brilliant idea. I do work in Dewsbury myself every day, and I do think it's quite dangerous, even though we see the presence of people, because when people are drunk, they simply don't know what they're doing. We do need police presence, and I would like to say, a couple of days ago, I finished work 7 o'clock, I was coming down, there was a police presence in an unmarked car. They actually stopped me, wanted to know what I was doing on Daisy Hill at 7 o'clock. So, yeah. So the good thing is, I think the council and the police officer, they are working together, even though it's an unmarked police car, and they stopped a councillor, so I was wondering if it was staged. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Darwan. Councillor Cooper, please.
Yeah, really positive and very supportive of the policy. I do reflect that the public space protection orders that are currently about to go in place in Huddersfield and other places, that's one end of it, but if you're not actually dealing with the alcohol problems at the other end of it, then you're not dealing with those issues. And also the support that we need to put in place for people as well. One thing that I do think is important is we take opportunities. So when we do find a shop that is selling illegal tobacco, when we do find a shop which is money laundering, when we do find a shop that is a front for all sorts of other activities, that we do take that opportunity to remove their licence and take that opportunity at that point. So it's not simply about stopping new shops, but making sure the ones that are breaking the law right now and are fronts for dodgy organisations are dealt with at the same time.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Tony McGrath, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I worry that we're missing the point in terms of what we're trying to achieve is the right thing to reduce antisocial behaviour and to stop as many shops selling alcohol, but it's a demand thing. So if there isn't the demand, there wouldn't be as many shops. So we need to be looking at why there's such a demand for these shops. And the minute you start, hopefully we reduce the number of shops in the town centre and we get shops that are more desirable. But that's free market capitalism. What sells will come into the town centres. And if you manage to get rid of all of these off licences, what are you going to do about supermarkets? They also sell lots of alcohol at very similar prices. So I think we're looking at the wrong end of this, and I think we should definitely be looking more towards how to reduce the demand on these premises, because they will shut automatically when nobody's buying the alcohol from them in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Bramwell, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I'm actually in favour of this. I think it's a great starting point. But one thing I do want to highlight is there's colleagues that have been in here and there's other adults outside the chamber that recognise the antisocial behaviour and the social needs that are increasing in the town centre. And I think it's important to recognise that if we're in fear as adults, how young people in the town centre are feeling and the risks that they are put under with the current social needs. So I think it's a great starting point, and I agree with some of the comments that some of the other councillors have made. Great starting point, and we should use it as such, a starting point and as a means to move forward in addressing the actual issues and the root causes of the issues that are within the town centre of Dewsbury. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bramwell. Councillor Ali Arshad, please. Are you? Yeah. Right, let me just... Okay. There.
Thank you. Just to address an earlier point, supply and demand. I think the whole idea when we discussed this in the licensing meeting was to try and actually reduce the supply element in the key areas of Huddersfield and Dewsbury. And I think the overriding thought process in my case is I've been to Dewsbury Town Hall on a number of occasions recently after a long time. And it hurts me when I don't get to see our elderly go into town where really if they can't drive, or there is a bus service that takes them into an area where it's social as well as shopping, as well as browsing, and they can't do that in a safe environment. And I hope this is just a start point of what we can do to safeguard our elders, and then hopefully later on create a safe environment for our teenagers as well to be able to go into these environments without picking up any bad habits or anything like that. So if this is a start point, let's all welcome it. And then going forward, whatever else we can do, we all know we want the same end result. Let's do everything possible to work together on this one, which I know we will, because it's dear to all our hearts in our inner towns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arshad. Councillor Safdie, are you wanting to speak as well, or will you just lend in Councillor Arshad your mic?
Thanks. Do you mind? I speak.
Can we just get IT to look into
Yes,
what's
I'll use
wrong
my
with
own mic now. Thank you very much.
Councillor Arshad's mic as well, please.
Thank you.
Safdie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, so as the son of a highly respected a retailer and coming from a family of retailers, we sympathise greatly with the message of not only the Federation of Postmasters, but the Federation of Retail Newsagents and the Association of Convenience Stores. I think the key point that Councillor Cooper made, we need to work with the licensing and trading standards to expand on these proposals and to make sure the retailers who are selling bootlegged alcohol and often fake alcohol are punished severely, because that's not only causing health issues, but we've come across cases, trading standards actually have come across cases where this bootlegs booze is sold to underage teenagers, and that can cause a multitude of addiction issues. So I think the key thing is cracking down on those unscrupulous retailers and carrying out more mystery shops with young people with trading standards in tow.
Thank you, Councillor Safdie. If there's no more comments, I want to come back to Councillor Firth. Right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank colleagues for their general support on this issue. And we have widened the debate somewhat on what I'm proposing today. But that's maybe come back as another debate, actually, safety in town centres. But as for now, I welcome your support, and I hope it's unanimous.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. We'll now go to the vote on this, and we'll vote electronically again, please. Okay, that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 11, which is written questions to the Leader, Cabinet Members, Chairs of Committees and nominated spokespersons. A written schedule of submitted questions and responses has been circulated. This will be taken as read. One supplementary question to each submitted question is permitted if the member is present. Where the member isn't present, I think somebody else from Cabinet will be taking or maybe answering those questions. I will go through the questions in turn and invite the opportunity for supplementary questions. Okay, so we have a total of 30 minutes for this item. We'll start off with question 1. Councillor Greaves, do you have a supplementary for Councillor Pattison, please?
Yes, I do, thank you. I am a little confused that some of the answers to the original questions don't really match up with the original questions, but you get used to that after a while. So, it almost seems to be that nobody's taking ownership of the budget that was passed at Cabinet. I do wonder whether or not there's anybody who actively supports it. But my supplementary question is so where does that leave us with things like the dementia care homes or with the policy on refilling grit? Is there any ownership of any of these policies from Labour? Or is it all somebody else's idea that they're all disowning? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greaves. I don't think there's any misunderstanding on the response that you've already had to the original question you put in. A little bit of confusion in terms of what you're actually asking as a supplementary, I think. But can I just say that the budget that you're talking about was not a final decision, was not necessarily the final Labour Party position on the budget. It was a budget that we agreed as a Labour group or as the Labour cabinet that could be released for consultation, which is what has happened. The consultation actually finishes today, and following that consultation, the Labour group will be looking at that again, as will officers, as will other groups in this council, and a final decision on the budget will be made on the 5th of March. And just in terms of taking responsibility, yes, of course we do, as a cabinet, take responsibility for the decisions we've had to make. And just in terms of the care homes, yes, we take responsibility for that, but I have to say that was last year's budget that we are responding to, not this year's. And then the grit as well, of course we take responsibility for what's in, but that isn't part of this year's budget. There's no suggestion that gritting is reduced this year. Winter maintenance remains the same. So that's all I can say to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pattison. Councillor Greaves again for question 2. I understand Councillor Ahmed isn't here if you do have a supplementary, but Councillor Crook has decided he will try and answer your supplementary, if that's okay with you. Yeah.
So the supplementary is that we were promised a breakdown at the last meeting, which didn't come through. But there has been a breakdown by ward provided to the members' reference group. So this idea that there isn't a lower level of information available is simply not correct. So whilst it might not be by individual collection rounds, the information can be provided at a much lower level than just North Kirklees or South Kirklees. And the request is that that information is shared with all councillors, all 69 councillors, that the latest figures that break down the recycling rates and the contamination rates is shared with all of us, without having to ask for it again, without having to wait for it, without having to get some answer that doesn't really answer the original question, that just simply the information that's always existed and always has been available and that was promised at the last meeting is actually shared. So I would just like a simple yes would be lovely. Perhaps I might not get a simple yes.
Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Councillor Greaves. I mean, as you've probably predicted, there isn't a simple yes or no answer to this, and that's because the data isn't collected in that way. So there are several different ways that we monitor the levels of contamination in the collection rounds. One of them is by a visual inspection by the teams as they collect, but that doesn't mean that that round is then taken to one of the sites, the transfer stations for the north or the south, so it's mixed up by the time it gets to the transfer station because of different rounds going to different stations. There's a second level of testing of contamination rates, which is whether the load is accepted or rejected at a transfer station. We do have data on that, but as I've said, that isn't split between north and south. And then there's a third layer where we do sample testing of the post-sorting material to see what the recycling rates are at that level. So we can give you data on individual rounds, which is indicative data, not accurate data, because that's just when people open the bin and have a look. Obviously, if there's contamination lower down, that won't register. Equally, they might miss something even if it is near the top of the bin. What I can say is that there has been a change in the way that we address contamination on individual rounds, not on a north-south, but by round, where we are focusing on that indicative data, our education teams, who will go and knock on every door on that round. And we found that when we speak to people about what they can and can't recycle, 85% of them then mend their ways and put the right things into their recycling bins. And that's how, over the last 12 months, we've seen a reduction in our contamination rates from 20% overall down to around 10% overall, which I think is a phenomenal success. So the education part of that is the important bit in my view. But there isn't a simple split north-south in the way that you've asked the question. So apologies, I can't provide that.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Greaves again for for question 3. Do you have a supplementary?
I do, but I wonder if there's any point asking questions. The answer to that previous question was a breakdown was provided to the members' reference group. That information exists, unless the officers presenting the information to the members' reference group were misleading that group. But let's just move on.
Do you have a supplementary for question 3?
Yeah, thank you. So we've seen year-on-year increases in fly tipping, which coincides with ever tightening policies on the access to the household waste recycling centres. So where we've restricted what vehicles can go in and who can go in, fly tipping rates keep going up and up and up. And actually, the answer given to this one is actually pretty accurate in that it shows a massive increase over the last few years in reports of fly tipping. It doesn't actually break down really what enforcement's taken place, other than to put some positioning nationally. But we've just introduced some even tighter access to the tips by reducing the opening hours. My local tip is the one in Meltham, and we've had lots of anecdotal reports about dumping at the gate, round the corner, by bins. It hasn't been helped by the issues over bin collections with the Christmas and with the weather. But there's always that concern, perhaps, that we're saving a few quid up front to generate even bigger costs further down the line. And fly tipping's accelerating off a heck of a rate. So what's the feedback? What's the early days feedback in terms of increased fly tipping in and around the sites that have been closed or had reduction in hours? Are we seeing a spike? What information is being collected?
Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Councillor Greaves, for the opportunity to talk about fly tipping here. You're right, the number of reports of fly tipping have increased, but that's not necessarily directly correlated to an increase in the number of the amount of fly tipping. The team, the Green Space Action team, do an absolutely fantastic job. They've got better at doing that. They're in the top third nationally, I think, in terms of their efficacy. They're seizing more vehicles, they're doing more prosecutions, and yeah, they're collecting a little bit more waste. So we've gone from 300 tonnes collected the previous year to 320 tonnes last year. That's been done by the same team, so the same staffing and vehicle cost, and the only increase in cost to the council has been the actual weighing of the waste that's collected. So I think that represents a success for that team, and I'd like to thank them for doing that. In terms of the reports of fly tipping since the changes in opening hours at the household waste recycling centres in your ward and in my ward, and sorry, near my ward, but in Denbydale, and the closure of the Nab Lane site, we've seen a decrease in the reports of fly tipping since that change took place. I don't think that necessarily is directly correlated. The way that we record fly tipping is quite complex, so you might get 10 reports of the same fly tip, for example, and that would be logged 10 times on our system because 10 different residents had... Could you apologise? I will try and speak into my mic. I was trying to look at who I was speaking to. So the reporting system is quite complex. You might get 10 reports of the same fly tip. They might actually be reported at slightly different locations. People might say on a certain road, other people might say on a junction or whatever, so it's quite difficult sometimes to break that down accurately. The other thing that can happen is an individual report of fly tipping, in the time it takes for us to respond to that, and obviously there's a little bit of a delay while the service does that in an efficient manner, you might get copycat fly tipping, so quite often someone sees a mattress has been dumped and other people bring a mattress or whatever. So it might actually be 4 instances of fly tipping that we're only recording as one. So it's very difficult to get exactly accurate figures on it, but I think it's a success that the team with the same budget and the same staffing resource have managed to collect more fly tipped material, and also that that we're ranked very, very highly nationally as well. So a success story, and thank you for the opportunity to illustrate that.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Taylor, do you have a supplementary for question 4?
Press it now, don't I?
Oh, you were on. Here goes, now you're on.
Thank you. Apologies. Thank you, Councillor, for your response. The reason I asked about grass verges is because of a particular issue I have in my ward with one particular grass verge. where there's a car that is parking permanently on it. It's damaging the ground, well, it's damaged the grass verge, it's virtually mud now, but it's not deemed to be the road, it's not deemed to be the pavement, so you won't take any enforcement action on it. This car, where it's parked, actually obscures the view as you're accessing a cul-de-sac where a school is based, where it's coming out of the cul-de-sac onto a major A road. So I've been trying since 2022 to get the council to do something about it. And despite my best efforts, and like with many of the issues I raised here, I've raised it with all sorts of people across the chamber, including officers at quite senior levels, can't seem to get a response or an answer. And I wonder if you'd mind picking this up. And, you know, after 2.5 years of trying, it'd be nice if we could actually try and do something about this.
Councillor Crook.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor, for bringing this very specific issue about a specific verge here. I'm afraid without more detail and the opportunity to research that specific issue, I'm not able to give you a specific answer, but by all means email me and I will chase that up with the service while I'm covering for Councillor Ahmed. What I would say is that it's quite complex without knowing exactly what the ownership of that verge is. If it belongs to the council and there's no TRO there, then it might be our jurisdiction, but actually if they're not blocking the highway, there might not be an offence being committed, so it might be quite complex to enforce. If they're causing an obstruction, and I'm not sure whether a visual obstruction, so you've identified that it's preventing view from a junction, then it might be a police matter to enforce, but by all means send me the details and I'll do my best to get to the bottom of it for you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Taylor, again. Supplementary for question 5.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Crook, for covering for Councillor Ahmed and for the response. My concern is, in the response, it states that if a request is made, officer assessment will take place, etc., etc., etc. I've made several requests in the last couple of years on zebra crossings in my ward to ask for an assessment to be done about whether it needs to be upgraded. And every time, the answer I've had back is there isn't the resources to do an assessment. So my concern is somehow you got an assessment done for one, but they're refusing to do that for them. And I don't know whether other members in the chamber have had a similar response. I would have hoped that we would treat everybody the same way and the same approach. And I just wonder if it's something you can look into, why some they will do an assessment of and others they refuse to.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor, for bringing this to me, because over the last couple of days I've been able to find out a lot about this particular upgrade, which is in my ward and which I didn't know much about beforehand. What I would say is, having done some fairly deep research, the beginning of this project was a long time before I was elected, and actually there were 3 members from your party in the ward at that time. I don't know whether they were on cabinet or not, but I'm assuming there's absolutely no undue influence brought at any time. What I would say, certainly there isn't on this case, what I would say is that they had intended to do a junction upgrade, because you've got the A635, Sheffield Road, Newman Road, whatever, all joined together, and everyone knows there's a hot spot of queuing there. I know Donald Firth was very keen to get that resolved, and I've had various meetings with him before he retired. I think when I was first elected, I was brought into a meeting with Councillor Davis and Councillor Firth with Colin Parr, who's no longer with us, discussing the possibility of that scheme. Funding has never been found for that scheme, and it was on the back burner. I think I did send a request for an update maybe 12 months ago, but this particular scheme is not just a crossing upgrade, I've discovered. It's got a, I want to check the details correctly, but it's got some sort of sensor loop which can tell when the queuing traffic has got too long, and it sends a false signal to Sheffield Road to release the traffic from the A635. So I think that's probably why the burden of evidence needed to get the scheme is different from just a request on a zebra crossing. My understanding is this has not come out of the capital programme, so it's nowhere near the major project scheme or anything, so it hasn't come through any of my portfolios while I've been there. But the funding has come from some Section 106 and has been an officer delegated decision. So I'm absolutely delighted that it's happened. I hope that it will solve the traffic problem, that Donald will be pleased about that, because finally something's been done. I absolutely support it, but beyond that, I can't tell you how you get things done. It's just an officer delegation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that we suspend Standing Order paragraph 12.4 to allow us to complete the remainder of the supplementary questions, please.
So I'm assuming you've moved that, Councillor Hall. Is that seconded? Councillor Taylor. We're going to go to the vote on this. So Councillor Hall has proposed, and it has been seconded by Councillor Taylor, that we extend the time on this agenda item so we get to take all the supplementaries for the written questions which have been submitted. We'll vote using our consoles, please. That is carried. Yeah, that's carried, so we'll continue with this item until the end. Okay. So are we on question 5, are we?
Question 6.
Question 6, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Question 6, Councillor Longstaff.
Thanks for the reply. Obviously, for the next couple of months, we're going to be debating budgets, and I think we all probably know in this hall that we're going to need more volunteers, not less. Every volunteer I speak to is getting frustrated with Kirklees Council, and some are even threatening to resign and not do the volunteering. So, can we look into why they think that? I know you give a very detailed reply, which I'm grateful for, but can we look into why some volunteers are really frustrated and get their view of why we could improve it? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Longstaff. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Councillor Longstaff. Having been a volunteer since I was a teenager until now, even, I fully understand people's frustration at volunteering. Not as a result of any council or anything else like that, but I think all volunteers, or a majority of volunteers, and I think I'm talking about the type of, there's all sorts of different volunteers, but I think I'm talking about the volunteers that you are referring to. We are all getting an awful lot older, and there's nobody coming in to replace us. There's no new blood, and it's getting more and more difficult to find people to volunteer with community groups, with voluntary groups, in hospitals or wherever it might be. And it is a thankless task in many cases, but I mean, we must thank all our volunteers. But also I have to say that every one of the members in this room is a volunteer. All 69 members are volunteers, not just here in this council or in the council chamber or in any of the committee work or anything else like that you do, but in our wards. And we...
The leader of the council is actually answering the question that Councillor Longstaff has asked.
Yes, I am. We're all ward councillors, and so I think we all have volunteers in our wards, and I think as members we've all got an opportunity to help volunteer groups. We've got our ward budgets where we can help. There's all the detail that there is in the response that I've already given. We have got active citizens team to help with volunteering and with community groups in our wards. There is a very well established now crowdfunding platform, the Growing Great Places, that the council supports, not just in terms of money, but also in terms of helping groups to get funding from that particular source. And there is just the council is so involved via various different partnerships with voluntary groups, via community groups, via Community Plus team, all sorts of things. And we're not cutting any of those. Those are not being reduced. The support that we're giving to community groups is not being reduced. I know it's not easy. As I say, I've got that experience myself. But there's no way that we are reducing the support that we have been giving for years to community and voluntary groups, and we'll continue to do so. If there's specific problems with a particular community group or voluntary group not being able to get an answer they need, then let me know what that is. But we do work very hard with our VCS. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pattison. Councillor Joe Lawson, do you have a supplementary for question 7?
I do, yes.
Thank you.
Can I just say thank you for answering the actual question? And from the figures that I was given you, I can assume that Kirklees spends about £300,000 a year on fly tipping, plus probably a few extra thousand from other departments that they actually borrow staff from. With that amount of money and the financial restraint that we are under, is it now not the time when we need to be more proactive regarding fly tipping and not reactive? When are the people of the Walpole estate going to be able to walk past certain areas that you can bet your bottom dollar that you can go down at least once a week and there will be fly tipping there? There are other areas within Crossland Moor, and I'm sure people will be able to report from those things. So when are we actually going to be more proactive and start monitoring these sites and stop fly tipping instead of just cleaning it up day in, day out kind of thing? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lawson, for another opportunity to talk about the fantastic Green Space Action Team. I think you're about right. We spend about £300,000 on fly tipping. That isn't only on cleaning up fly tipping. Some of that, as you've identified, is proactive. Yeah. So the fly tipping element, but the fly tipping element of that team's activities are not just picking up fly tipping. They're also investing in things like covert and overt camera systems. They're in prosecution of people who are caught for fly tipping. They're in removal of vehicles for fly tipping, and that's why we're ranked in the top third nationally for our performance on fly tipping. So the team doesn't only respond; they are also doing proactive work to try and prevent fly tipping. I think one measure of that success is how we stack up nationally in terms of being 70th out of whatever it was. I forget the figure. Sorry, 300 odd councils, but also the fact that they've managed to process more waste with the same resource means they're getting better at doing it. So we're responding more quickly, doing it in a more efficient way. And as I say, investing in systems to try and proactively prevent fly tipping in the first place. So I think we are. I'm happy to go into more detail, look for more detail if you'd like, if you drop me an email, but that's my response with the information I have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Joe Lawson, do you have a supplementary for question 8?
I'd just like to thank Councillor Pattison for her very comprehensive reply to what the council is actually going to be doing regarding the Gaza motion, and I actually look forward to some kind of action coming there, because the reply seemed to be a bit vague, that something may happen, but it could be a little while, etc. But obviously we can raise the question at another meeting.
Councillor Pattison.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson, for your supplementary. I can give you a bit more detail in terms of what will happen next, but I am very pleased, and I'm sure most of us in this room have already clocked it, but I am very, very pleased to hear that the ceasefire in Israel and Gaza has been announced whilst we've been sitting here. That is extremely good news for absolutely everyone, not just, sorry, somebody else has already heard, for obviously all the people of Israel and Gaza and the rest of the Middle East, but also relatives and friends that they have back here in Kirklees and the rest of the UK, obviously, as well. Yes, officers have been, are looking at what was asked at the last, in your motion at the last council, or the 2 council meetings ago, and there will be a report back regardless of the ceasefire. They will still carry on that work. It will come back to council. It will probably go via a corporate governance and audit committee meeting prior to coming back to council. It will look, as you asked, at all the consumables and the products that goods and consumables that we do either produce or buy, and it will come back here. It's taking a while, or it will take a while, because there's various bits of legislation, there's government guidance, and there's new government guidance we know is coming on board, but won't be there until February, so it would have been unwise to announce anything or come back with a full report until after February. And it'll include details of our contract register and what's happening regionally as well as nationally. So there will be a report back. And of course, just for fullness, we have got on this agenda the response from the Foreign Office to the second half of that motion. But it's so good to hear of the ceasefire today. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Councillor Lawson, do you have a supplementary for question 9?
I'd just like to thank the actual comprehensive reply that I actually got when this issue was raised, was actually raised, and I just want to take this moment in time to actually thank the parking enforcement team that have been out in Crossland Moor, Thornton Lodge, and done various days of action with the police, and it really is for our residents who have had the blight of obstructive parking, etc. It's actually been really good that they actually feel that finally they're being listened to. So I'd like to thank the parking team, and there's no need to reply.
Lawson. Councillor Taylor, do you have a supplementary for question 10?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Cook, for responding on behalf of your colleague. The response doesn't actually answer the question. Because my question was quite simply, do you think it was good enough? And what are you doing about it? Yes, I would like to take this opportunity also to thank all of the teams that were out there, the gritting teams and the binmen as well, that were out there in very, very trying and difficult circumstances. But they can only do what they can do with the budgets that are provided. I also think we should acknowledge, whilst I'm on my feet, the farmers across the district that helped us, because they played a huge role. Certainly, I don't know about across elsewhere, but certainly in the rural bit, they played a huge role in terms of helping get the roads cleared. But my question was, do we think it was good enough? And what are we going to do about it? And it doesn't answer that. So my question is still, that there have been issues with schools that were closed, there were issues with grit bins that weren't filled. We've had concerns from snow wardens who couldn't get any additional grit. We've had issues raised about which roads are being gritted and which aren't being gritted. We've got new estates which aren't being gritted. There's a whole issue. I raised this through scrutiny a couple of years ago when there were changes brought in by this administration to the winter maintenance, and I said it wasn't good enough. We've attempted to put more money into winter maintenance through budget amendments, but they've been voted down. And now we've had a cold snap, and I think we all across the chamber have had to help residents in various ways on various issues, partly because we'd cut the budget and cut back, and now we're reaping the consequences of that. So my question again is quite simply, do you think it was good enough? What does the Cabinet propose to do to learn those lessons? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I'll leave the schools bit until later because there's a question on schools, so I'll cover that if that's all right afterwards. And I'd just like to point out from the offset that every possible effort has been undertaken to keep us all safe and moving during this cold snap, and that resource has not been an issue. Financial resource has not been an issue in this. The council has not restricted the response. So firstly, let me say, as you have, that our officers and contractors deserve congratulating and thanking, because the work that they've put in over this cold snap has been absolutely phenomenal. So in terms of is the response good enough, I think they've given above and beyond in terms of their response with the human resource that's available. And as I've already indicated, the financial resource has not been limited in this response. Of course, all of our roads can't be kept clear. We have to understand there will be some disruption when we have an extraordinary weather event like this. We had 8 days where the surface of the roads didn't get above zero and quite often was well below zero, so at -6, 7, 8. We have to understand in that context that the salt that we spread on the road ceases to be effective, so it stops working after a certain amount of time. In fact, beyond Thursday, there was no point snow ploughing because the snow became compacted into ice and it couldn't be moved. And anyone who tried to remove any of the material that was left on the pavements, you needed a pickaxe. You just couldn't do it. It was impossible. So it isn't a lack of response. It's very extraordinary weather conditions and an excellent team doing the best they can to try and keep us all safe and moving. Just for a bit of context, the service spread 5,470 tonnes of salt onto the road in 8 days. That's almost half a full year's normal requirement. So absolutely phenomenal. In addition to those rounds, so they were out, at 5 o'clock in the morning before we were even there, doing 54% of our road network as the primary circuit in 2 hours, by the way, in really cold conditions. Then they seamlessly moved onto our secondary road network and cleared all of those roads. And then they carried on and did roads on request and roads that access community buildings and so on. So was the response sufficient? The response from that team was absolutely exemplary, and I will not join in any criticism of that. I think that all highways operational staff were deployed. So where there was requests from schools or from community buildings, highways staff went there and physically helped to try and clear the pathways. With schools opening, it was very complex. So you've got the road to access the school, assuming that your teachers live near the school and on that road network. Some of them come from out of the borough, by the way. Then you've got the pavements, which is very difficult to grip because obviously the machinery can't get onto the pavements, there are cars in the way and so forth. And then you've got the pathways within the school. So even, I think we had responses, I said I wouldn't talk about schools, but I think we had requests from 8 schools to clear pathways. Not all of those schools, even though we went and gave them every help we were able to, chose to open. I know Greenhead College stayed closed for the whole week in the centre of Huddersfield, whereas the high school in my ward was open after Tuesday, from Wednesday onwards. So it's very much specific to the school, specific to the layout of the school, the paths around the school, the effort they were able to put in. I mean, the sophistication of the team here, it isn't just a question of, oh, it looks cold, let's go out and do some gritting. There's prediction, there's monitoring of the road temperature across the borough. They went out and gritted ahead of the first fall of snow, but the snow fell for something like 18 hours without stopping. There was 6 inches of snow. In my ward, where it's high up, there were drifts. There was no way you could have kept those roads open, and it wouldn't have been safe to do so. So a judgment has to be made about not just the safety of road users, other than the teams, but also the safety of our staff. I've forgotten what else you asked, John, to be honest. I got carried away praising the team. They did so well. Yeah, so I think, 250 tonnes per drop on the road network. We can have a discussion about whether we want to extend the primary gritted network, but that, as you rightly indicate, will have a budgetary implication. Not in emergency situations like this, but in the normal run of gritting. Yeah, the salt, salt's a complex one because it only works down to about -8. Once you get colder than that, it requires a kind of thaw-freeze cycle to be effective. And actually it requires traffic as well, because we mistakenly call it grit. It's not grit at all, it's just pure salt. And we need cars to drive over it and break it down into a powder so it can react with the surface melted material, and that causes a highly saline solution which changes the freezing point of water. If we don't have that travel over the grit, or the conditions stay too cold, then the gritting is not effective. And as I've said, after Thursday, snow ploughing became ineffective as well. We did say during the week that we would, as is part of the policy, because of the extraordinary weather conditions, refill all of the grit bins. That's a 3-week programme. That doesn't happen overnight. And as I've already said, all available staff were already deployed either in snow ploughing, grit spreading, or in helping clear particular roads and routes to community buildings. So that is now underway. It started at the beginning of this week, and in 2 weeks' time, all the grit bins will be refilled, ready for further cold conditions. That's the reality of how that service can respond. The Snow Warden programme, it's been a massive success. I remember when I was Highways portfolio holder standing up in here and asking people to sign up. We now have 100 Snow Wardens across the borough signed up, 44 currently training and 25 waiting to start training. So the Snow Warden programme, but we wouldn't expect, I do apologise, it was my papers on the microphone. We wouldn't expect the Snow Wardens to be able to respond to this sort of extreme weather, and it probably wouldn't be safe for them to do so. So we do have to expect people to use their own judgment about whether it's safe for them to go and try and clear the pavements when either it's a blizzard condition or -8 or the snow is compacted into ice where the grit won't be effective either. And I hope that's part of their training as well. So we will be able to restock some of the Snow Wardens probably. I will look into that. I think I've answered all the points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Hall, do you have a supplementary for question 11?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just as an aside, the last few questions that have been submitted to written questions are, of course, all about the snow and the ice. And the decision was taken back in May that we had to have written questions in a week before the council. Had all this snow and ice occurred on Saturday and Sunday, we wouldn't have been able to even ask any questions about it tonight, which is one reason why I thought it was a bad move at the time. Anyway, that's an aside. Thank you, Councillor Pinnock, for your response to this. As you can probably tell, the question is not really about schools, it's about schools and other things as well. A lot of the schools were closed last week, primarily because of the icy paths. From Tuesday onwards, a lot of schools had to open late because the staff couldn't get into the school, because the children of the staff couldn't get into their schools until a certain time. The staff that couldn't get to their schools until a certain time. And the whole thing had an horrible domino effect all the way through the week. And some schools, as you see on here, every school closed on Monday. And over a quarter of them still closed or partially closed on Friday. Now, I know Councillor Crook has said that everything was done. We can't afford for this to happen regularly. And I know you'll say, oh, these were extraordinary events, but you know, we've seen them a couple of times like this now in the past few years. And I think it's down to us as a council, and I'd ask perhaps Councillor Cook this question, whether we'll consider whether there is more that could be done so that we could be better prepared for the next time this happens. And I know you said you were pleased with the response. I think what you were telling us is you thought the council had done everything that it said it would do. It's not quite the same as did it do everything that could have been done had we had a slightly different policy. So I suppose my question really is, can we revisit the winter maintenance policy so that it encompasses things like support we can give to schools to make sure that we don't have a similar occurrence in years to come?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. I think the original question that you asked was an important one. I think a lot of people will be interested to know how schools, whether they stayed open, partially open, what the situation was for school children. So I really appreciate the question. And I also think it's important to recognise what the council, or what service the council provided to schools, so everyone's clear about what that looks like. So the council provided a raft of support to schools. So there's 24/7 support for schools through the emergency planning that we provide. So gritting of all the main roads, the side roads leading to schools. Where schools contacted the council, we provided additional gritting and additional support, but that was on request from schools. Our green space and community teams also provide assistance with clearing paths external to schools, again, on request. The council provided assistance to clear parkways and car parks within school grounds, again, on request, and also dealt with other issues such as boilers and roofing issues in association with the weather. And I think it's important to point out on request, which is the council provided the service that was expected, that that we usually provide even in extreme circumstances, but also schools had the opportunity to request additional support, and that was provided to schools. So in terms of the future then, you're right, we always need to be having a look, reviewing and considering whether there's more we could have done and what the future should look like. So the council is always assessing the services that they provide for the future. That's something we do routinely anyway. And it's important to recognise lesson learned. Of course, these were exceptional circumstances, but as we know with global warming, there's a lot more exception. These things could happen again in the near future, so we can't afford to be complacent in these circumstances. So what we'll be doing then, we'll be holding a debriefing meeting next week to look at how we can improve responses. And it'll also be a good opportunity to remind schools about how best to access the council services and what services are provided to schools. So that's really important as well. But also as well, we recognise how resilient our schools are. You know, they were able to deal with things very quickly, provide homework and lots of other resource, especially where, you know, there were exams that children were sitting, key stage exams, GCSEs and so on. And that's something that schools are equipped to deal with because of COVID-19. So I'd like to commend the schools, the hard work, the assessments the schools have done, the decisions that they've made to protect our children, but also council officers, green space team, community teams, but residents and volunteers. This isn't something that we could do in isolation. It's important that we all work together, support the efforts going forward. So as I've said, there's going to be a debrief. I will be at that debriefing. We'll be looking at things openly about what worked well, what didn't work well, where we need to improve things for the future, and see where we go from there. So I hope that answered the question for you.
So, Councillor Hall, do you have a supplementary for question 12?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I mean, we do appreciate what's done, just to follow up the previous question. And I'm very appreciative of it. I wouldn't have wanted to be out gritting there with -7 degrees on a night or whatever it was. They have done a good job for us. But of course, you can't follow the season of goodwill to all men without a little complaint, can you? Because that's what Christmas is all about. It's been mentioned before, and in fact, Councillor Pinnock just mentioned about gritting side roads to schools. These are not done routinely. I have at least one school where the road that leads to the school is not gritted. It's never gritted any year. It's not on a priority route. And I think we do really have to review this policy to make sure that schools, particularly, people can get to them. If you're on a main road, you're laughing because the main roads were done. They were done very well in my patch. I could go out Monday afternoon on the main roads, no problem. But the actual approaches to the schools were not done and weren't done. And I think as a routine, they should be. And the other thing I mentioned there was about gritting the town centres, because one of the things I've never quite seen the point of is gritting the town centre when nobody can get out because you can't even get out your street. So, you know, there's a wonderful gritted town centre, but there's nobody in it. And I would have thought we ought to turn that on its head and let people get out of the roads first and then do the town centres. That's my view. So I wonder whether Cabinet could commit to reviewing this soon, or even referring it to scrutiny, so that a very timely piece of work could be done, because this work could, of course, inform the budget decisions that we'll be making in March. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I think so that, you know, roughly speaking, we can break that down into two parts. So there's a question about schools and then a question about town centres. So there's a protocol to follow. We've agreed a priority gritting route, which is 54% of our network. They move seamlessly onto the secondary gritting route. If a school doesn't exist on the primary or the secondary gritting route, they can make requests and we will grit those roads in extreme circumstances such as we've had now. The issue that we have here, and this is this comes back to, you know, the independence of the school and the senior leadership team there to make a decision about the safety of opening the school. Schools are not, it's not just a question of clearing the road to the school. So Greenhead College was closed for a week. I'm pretty certain that there's a lot of gritting that happens in the middle of Huddersfield. So roads is one issue, footpaths is another issue, and I think I've already said it's difficult to grit footpaths. Paths within the school are a really important issue, and I think a lot of the schools that closed it was because you couldn't get from the highway that you could travel on to the front door of the school safely or between classrooms. So that's an issue. Staff availability is another issue. Frozen snow not responding to grit means that even when you've got staff willing to volunteer and get out in the cold and remove the snow from the pathways, it's actually physically not possible to do that. I did hear reports that one of the car parks in one of the schools was, you know, they spent 2 days trying to clear it and then decided they just weren't opening because it was, you know, too big a task. There have also been other problems that we've supported schools with. Floods. burst pipes because of the extreme cold, heating breakdowns. I think Councillor Pinnock referenced a roof help, that's going to be a leaking roof. So it's a much more complex picture than simply deciding we're going to grit the road up to each school. As I say, I think 8 schools asked us for special assistance, and even though we provide special assistance, not all of those schools chose to open even with the special assistance. So it's a more complex question than simply have we got the right policy in place. I absolutely, following any event like this, there's a post-mortem of how we've responded. I've already been in meetings, and certainly we were discussing our winter response. I don't think that a knee-jerk change to our priority gritting route is necessarily the way to go, because the priority gritting route is set up, in consultation with other groups, blue light services and so forth. We need to make sure that the critical routes are travelable. If you go back to the town centre, there are critical infrastructure, critical buildings like the police station, or, in the centre of the town, you've also got bus turnarounds to talk about. So if you decided you weren't going to grit the town centre, how would transport happen for essential workers who didn't drive? And it would probably be a good choice not to drive your own car when it's so icy and snowy. So I think that's probably where we're at. It's not a bad call to have a discussion, a broader discussion about what our winter maintenance policy is. Certainly, as I say, those discussions have happened, and I think it'd be a dereliction for us not to have concentrated on those. The proper cabinet member to be dealing with this is currently off, unfortunately. But as I say, I have initiated those discussions, and we will certainly do that. And happy to work with other parties on what we think is appropriate and apportion accordingly in the future. It's a decision to make, isn't it? If you have all of the resource available for extreme circumstances, and we haven't had 8 days like this for a long time. I think 2013 probably the last time we had such extreme weather for a protracted period of time. If you want to have the resource ready to deal with that sort, then you've got to, what do you do with it for the rest of the time? You've got to strike a balance, but totally willing to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Hall, do you have a supplementary for question 13?
Yes, please. I couldn't let a winter go by without bemoaning the fact that the lack of Christmas week bin collections. I think I've said this about 15 years, so, take the opportunity to have a snooze if you've heard it before. But the question was, how long is too long, really, to leave your black bin? Ours was 4 weeks this time. And I know you're all going to say, well, we had bad weather. I appreciate that. But if we'd had a Christmas week bin collection, of course, it would have only been 3 weeks, not the 4 weeks that it was because of the snow. And I think people understand the bad weather. I think the bins is a basic service. It's bread and butter stuff, really, to the council. Personally, as a ward member in my own ward and as a resident, I get an extremely good service from the bin operatives. Very rarely have cause to complain. But this one point about having Christmas week bin collections does regularly crop up at this time of year by the residents. My initial question when I sent it through first was actually how many councils in England do have Christmas week bin collections? But I was told very nicely that we couldn't possibly get that information, so I've got to change my question. So I changed it to another one. But of a straw poll that I've done of council leaders and opposition leaders, none have yet come back to me to say we don't have Christmas bin collections. In other words, practically everybody else in the country does, apart from Kirklees. It is a bread and butter issue, and I'm coming to my question, Madam Mayor. We have ascertained before, because you'll know that this has cropped up before in our budget amendments, that it's something we would like to see. And we've been told by officers that actually it's a more or less budget neutral measure is this. It wouldn't take any more money because the bin men would still get the holidays, they'd just be having them at a different time. It's not going to cost any more. We've been told that by officers. So the question is, can you please look to include in the Cabinet's budget for this year provision, even if it's only £1,000 or two, to make the point for Christmas week bin collections? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Councillor Hall, again. So it's long been the practice in Kirklees that the bin men have a few days off, or the bin service has a few days off over Christmas. They work all of the other bank holidays through the year. I don't think it's unreasonable for them to have a holiday. Just quickly to your point around it being cost neutral, that's not the information I've been given by the service this week. You would have an issue where it would be difficult to force operatives to work on Christmas Day, for example. So I think there probably is justification for them to have a bit of a holiday. Sorry? Yes, so they only have like 3 or 4 days off, don't they, in effect, because they don't work on a Friday anyway, so it depends how the days fall. I mean, I fell right into the trap of this because my grey bin collection was exactly at the wrong time, so I was one of the people who waited longest to have my bin collected. I was very relieved when they made it as normal on Monday. And like you, I've never had cause to complain about the service. I think as councillors, we do receive a lot of complaints about the bins, and I think this is largely because people don't notice when their bin's collected successfully. They only notice when it's not, so there's a little bit of expectation or reporting bias about that. We can have a conversation about how we want the bin service to perform. If there hadn't been the extreme weather, that, to be fair, they couldn't have known when they were planning this, some people would have gone 3 weeks without a bin collection or something like this. Quite a few, I mean, you've done a straw poll of other councils to see if they collect at Christmas. It'd be useful to do a straw poll of councils to see if they've gone to 3 weekly collections, because a lot of councils have already gone to a longer collection interval. So we'd need to have that discussion in that context. As with all services, there need to be efficiencies made, so that would be a useful starting point, wouldn't it? I think in terms of the reset policy, I would just like to thank the teams, because it wasn't a lack of willing to do the collections after Christmas and in the cold weather. They were out every day trying to do collections. You had two problems. You had blocked off roads because of the snow and ice, and nobody wants a 32-tonne bin wagon going down their street covered in ice, because that's going to cause mayhem and risk to life and limb. The other thing is that because a lot of people quite sensibly decided not to drive to work, including, I'm sure, members here, there were a lot more cars parked on the streets, which made access for large bin wagons even harder than usual. So they had to make a judgment. They collected a lot of bins, but then we got to a point where they had to do a reset of the service, and that's why they had to prioritise the grey bins, because obviously that sort of waste can turn nasty if it's left for too long. Not so much in the cold conditions, but I think that's the right prioritisation. And then obviously you have to get back into the cycle. So I realise there's frustration for people whose grey bins would have been collected the week after. They'll get 2 collections of grey bins and their green bins will stay for a lot longer. But I do support the decision by the service to do that. It's the most sensible way forward. But happy to speak to you more about bin collection services if that's somewhere where you'd be interested to make change.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. That brings us to the end of agenda item 11. I'm now going to call for a break, and could everybody please be back no later than 7 p.m. so Councillor Kendrick can kick us off with the key discussion. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming back on time. We are going to start off with item 12, which is the key discussion on fostering in Kirklees. So this evening's key discussion will be presented by Councillor Kendrick, who is the Cabinet Member for Children's Services. So when you are ready, Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I beg to differ that not everybody has managed to come back on time. It may be because they heard a Miss Councillor Taylor asked me a little while ago if I was going to be doing karaoke with Tom Brailsford. But we have. I can assure you that's not happening. You'll be all safe. So it's going to be exciting, is this? Not because there's anything magic about what I'm going to say, but because I've misnumbered my paper sheets of the slides I'm going to show you. So we'll see how that works. So I always turn up like a bad penny to ask things of you, and here I am again. I'm going to ask things of you, and also I want to thank those people who stepped up in the past for different things in children's services and helped out. So I have every confidence you're going to do the right thing again. Now then, somebody tell me what I'm pressing here. Thank you. So we'll have a go with this. Oh, it's gone. There we are, it was already up. So, there's a question. And it's, could you help to provide stable and loving homes for our children and young people? And that's not just you folks. I'm not asking you all to run out and be foster carers, but if you've got an idea you might like to, please put your name forward. But this is a message to everybody in Kirklees, both in this chamber and outside it. I've left you all a present today, or a bribe, depending on how you want to view it. You've all got a badge, which I'd love you, particularly when you're in public places, to wear, in the hope that people will ask you what it's about. It's about fostering in Kirklees. I've also left you a small card with contact details and a larger one. And on the front here, I have some leaflets and a few posters. Please help yourself at the end of the meeting if you want them. If anybody wants more materials, just drop me a line and I'll make sure they're sent to you as such. So, let's see whether my numbering can get anywhere near. So, you can all read, but I'll tell you the first line is so important. All our children deserve to live in a caring, loving family home where they're supported to thrive. And I bet no one in this room disagrees with that. And that's so important. And it is so important that they still keep local connections wherever possible. If you imagine, for whatever reason, you have to come into care, away from your family, and then if you were then away from your school, away from your friends, your wider family, how traumatic might that be? To do the right thing is for our children in Kirklees who have to become looked after, to be kept in Kirklees with loving homes and safe homes. I'll give you a bit of and Tom will probably cringe over this because I'll probably get it wrong. I'm going to simplify a bit of the process, if you like. When some issue arises where affecting a youngster at home that means that they're not safe, there are problems there, the first thing the service does is try to help the family resolve those problems so a child can stay with their family. And that's the right thing to do. Sadly, sometimes that isn't possible. And the service looks to see if another family member could look after that child. Because if you can't be with your birth family, if you can be with auntie, uncle, grandma, granddad or whoever, that's a better thing. And you still have those connections that are so important. That's the second thing they do. There are other possibilities where there isn't anybody to do that, and we look for a foster placement. And we have brilliant foster carers in Kirklees. Sadly, not enough of them. It's increasing, but not enough. And this is really what this is all about. Some young people are also provided with a residential place in a home because that's more appropriate to their needs. If you're 16 or 17 and you have to become looked after, do you really want to go necessarily into a family home? Perhaps you would feel better in residential care in a group home. So that's one of the other things. I'm hoping you've read all that. Right, so it says you, but it should be we, because it's me also. We're what we always call corporate parents, and currently we're parents for 608 children and young people. If we haven't got enough homes, I'll be bringing them round. I know where you live. 71%, excellent. 71% of our children live with foster families, and that compares well with nationally, where it's 68%. You know, that's a good figure, but it's never good enough. There are some children who we can't find foster carers from within Kirklees, and they have to be placed with foster carers out of Kirklees. And you might think, oh, I'm thinking about resources and finance there, because it does cost more. But actually, it's what's the right thing to do for these young people, and it's within Kirklees. So we've got more applications for people to foster over the last 12 months, but we do need more, and that's why I'm banging on again about this. I'll move on and hope this is, I'm going to talk about the right slide. So this is a message from a foster child, and it's one of many, and this is to a foster carer. But by proxy, it's a message to you. It's a message to us as a council that somebody says, I felt safe and welcomed and looked after and made me ready to go into adulthood. And that's a really common message you get from children and young people who are in foster care. So what are we doing to try and improve things? And one of the things is about the recruitment that we're doing and trying to improve people's awareness, the public's awareness about fostering, make people think about it. And people foster for all sorts of reasons, but we say we provide a good support network with family-friendly policies. We provide excellent support, loads of training on different stuff. Carers can have annual leave if they need to have regular breaks. And our allowances, they don't necessarily match up with what the private sector provides. But let's not forget, the private sector are not doing it for altruism, they're doing it for profit. And this is about ensuring that good money is spent on foster carers in Kirklees. That means other money can be used for our young people and children. So it's really important to have Kirklees foster carers. And we don't mind if they're not exactly in Kirklees. We don't mind the odd one from Calderdale or Bradford or, you know, around and about, but locally as much as we can. So what attracts people to fostering? It's all written there. I suppose the third bullet point is the important one, that at a point in life where your life is changing, your children are leaving home, you might think, oh, thank God. But, you know, you might feel there's a bit of space now, I can offer a home for a child. And I'm not speaking just to you as councillors, I don't expect you all to be foster carers, but it's a message I'd like you to give to people. But, you know, when people, children have left home, or somebody's retired, or become redundant, or just thinks, I'm sick of the job I'm doing, and I want to do something that gives back and is of more value, and fostering offers that opportunity. I don't know why I've got any notes, I'm not reading them. So that there's a lot of myths about fostering that stop people or prevent people inquiring even, and we just want people to inquire. It may be they inquire and they say, in the end, it's not for me. But one of the myths is that you're too old to foster. You're going to be 21. I think you all score on that. There's no upper age limit apart from you have to be as fit as you need to be to look after the child at whatever age. You know, you don't necessarily have to be that fit to looking after a 15-year-old, do you? I don't expect you to be chasing them down the road. People think they've got to be homeowners. You don't have to be homeowners. You can be in rented property or any sort like that, and we're looking for people with a spare bedroom. And some people think, oh, I can't be a foster carer because I've never been a parent, so I know nothing about kids. But actually, there's a huge amount of training and people having a willingness to learn and support. And people have experience in other things, don't they? They work with a youth group, they work with scouts or guides, and they have an experience of young people to some extent, but we don't mind if you don't. Another myth, sometimes, you know, in the dim, distant past, I'm not looking at anybody in particular, you might have done something pretty roguish as a youngster, you know, and think, I won't be allowed because I'm, you know, I broke a shop window and got a whatever. Other people worry about health problems. There is a health check as part of the process, but, you know, we all have different issues, health issues that are with us all the time. It doesn't prevent you being a foster carer as long as it doesn't prevent you from providing the relevant care. The smoking one makes me cringe a bit. If you're a smoker, you can't have a child under 5. What barrier 6-year-olds have to smoke, I don't know. There is an expectation you wouldn't smoke in front of or with a child. And that bottom one really, really is important. People think, oh, well, I work, I can't be a foster carer. Loads of foster carers work. Loads of foster carers are looking after older youngsters or work from home. Now, I mean, COVID set that up as a normal lifestyle, hasn't it? So there are several types of foster caring, and people just think, oh, you get a child, they stay with you, and that's it until whenever, or they come for a little bit, and then you have to give them up, and it rips your heart out of your chest. And that puts people off. There are short-term foster carers, which includes emergency placements. Sadly, children coming into care, there isn't a set time that happens. It can be any time of the day or night, any day of the week, and we have to find a place where we can't say, oops, we're full. So having people who are willing to be ready to take a child at short notice for a short period to make sure that we can meet what we need to meet in terms of looking after them is really important. Long-term fostering is there. Child grows up with a family until they're an adult and they're ready to live independently. Added to that, we have something called staying put. Staying put is where a young person gets to 18 and they and the foster carer say, we don't want it to end, we want to continue. And they then become staying put carers, but then sadly, they're no longer foster carers unless they've got another spare bedroom. Short breaks, that's a specialist fostering scheme. It's planned by diaries, by arrangement, where disabled children, young people who need a short break go and stay with someone else who's qualified as a foster carer, or it provides support to other carers for a short period. You know, in everybody's lives, ill health comes along, a family emergency comes along, and you couldn't continue looking after a child. So short breaks is something that foster carers can rely on. And we have supported lodgings, and I really want you to look at that. This scheme provides help, care and support to young people aged 16 plus. And it's where they're not ready and they aren't legally of an age to be out on their own, but need a bit of supervision and support, but don't need the care of a younger child. And we really desperately need more of those foster carers. We need them all, but I'm emphasising. And then there's mother and baby, and that's where a mother and a new baby usually come and stay with somebody and are helped to look after that child and learn how to look after it. So, here's success. It don't look much, but it's as good as it gets. By the end of this financial year, we'll have had more mainstream foster carers than we've had before. And that'll be about 20. Don't sound many, does it? But that's 20 beds for children in safe, loving homes. Or it might be 2 beds if they've got capacity. And it's really important. We've 13 supported lodging carers for young people over 16, and we're desperate for more of those. You know, if you're 17, are you going to want to go into a family? You know, you're not going to think of it in that relationship. And then one of our greatest successes, and other authorities are in envy, we have an increasing number of special guardianship orders. And that's where there's a family member who can take a child, auntie, uncle, grandma, granddad, as I said before, or it may be a close family friend, and they go and live with them, so they still have that network surrounding them that they're used to. And then one of the great supports we do is Mockingbird. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's a hub where a really experienced foster carer opens their home, and foster families are linked around that Mockingbird hub. And they meet up socially, the youngsters go for sleepovers, they provide emergency support to those foster carers. And young people who are in Mockingbird hubs say to me, it's really great because everybody there's the same as me. Because it's really difficult for a youngster to be at school and be the one who's got a social worker coming to see them and being different. But, you know, we're going to open a 4th one, and I'm really pleased about that. And we're really looking to raise the profile of fostering throughout Kirklees, hence the leaflets, posters, badges, etc. So how can councillors help? You knew I was going to ask. So we're looking for people to be fostering champions in our communities. I don't mean you go out with a bell saying, bring out your empty bedrooms, tell us if you can foster, but wearing a badge, putting a poster up, having a card, having those conversations when you're in public places and public meetings is so important. And it's just getting more inquiries to foster is really what we're after, and it's so important. So the questions are there, and I don't need you to answer them now. I want you to reflect on them. How might you do that? What else can you think of to help generate inquiries to foster? And what support and information might you need from the fostering service? If you need more cards or leaflets or whatever, if you email me, I'll make sure you get them. But really, folks, really make this a very common conversation if you can. Be the bore. They say, oh God, there's John Taylor again here, he's going to talk about fostering. But, you know, let's get that communication out in our communities, because there are willing people out there who just don't know they were always meant to be a foster carer and they don't know how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. We're now going to go to any questions and comments. So we're going to start off with Councillor Addy.
Thank you for that, Councillor Kendrick, and the amazing work that the foster carers out there do for youngsters probably at the worst ever time in their lives, to give them that boost till, you know, long-term things. So I really love the idea we're going to get another one of these Mockingbird hubs. That's a fantastic way to give that extra support to the foster carers, and maybe something, that support being there, we can publicise as well, because then people don't feel like they're going to be on their own once they finish the training. I'd like to think we can all get out there and pester people a little bit and have that conversation. I was thinking though, if you haven't got a spare room, is there any way you can get involved? Is there anything you can do? Is there any way you can help?
You could potentially be a foster carer who just takes in babies. Because when you've got a small baby, it would not be unusual or uncommon to have them in a cot in the same bedroom as yourself. There's always the difficulty that you might, you know, at the point where they're going for adoption and you have to say bye-bye. But, you know, I know foster carers who've been doing that for 30 years. And they are magical people who still, even though there's a little heartbreak about that, they're part of that child's life story. And sometimes those as adults come back and find them to say, thank you for giving me that start. So that's a possibility. Okay, I've bored you to death. No, you can't.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, thanks for the update. It's appreciated, and I think it's nice that we have these subjects that we don't disagree on when we're from different sides of the political spectrum. So, yeah, I fully support everything you've said. It's weird looking at you so close when.
Am I intimidating?
Not intimidating, no. So I can't remember what I was going to say. Yeah, I am intimidated now. So yeah, I've only got one question actually, and it's not something. I was looking at this last night, and I was speaking to someone who was considering. I'm not sure whether it's called an independent visitor or.
Oh yeah.
So.
We need those.
Yeah. So that's the only thing you didn't mention in here.
It's not fostering.
No, it's not. No. It's related to this because I think the Kirklees website says that applications were closed in December 23. So I wonder if somebody could have a look into that because it's something that it's sort of it's for those of you who don't know. This is where somebody volunteers for a few hours a month to take out a child, you know, and take it on adventures and whatever else. And I'm sure Viv will clarify, but. We could look into that, and because if you haven't got the time to foster, you might have the time to do that.
I'm disturbed if the website says
It might have been just a glitch, you know.
And I'm looking at Tom to say we will look at that because we're absolutely desperate for independent visitors. There's a waiting list of looked after children who want somebody different rather than the people that they're living with or the people in the same care home as them who comes and you don't have to do anything magical. It can be going out for a coffee, going to a park, going bowling if you're adventurous. I think you should limit it at your age anyway. But, you know, once a month, doing something with a young person because it gives them a chance to speak to somebody different and is absolutely essential. And they are carefully matched with people. I haven't volunteered because I'm really worried that they won't find anybody to match me with. It'd be a bit humiliating. But, yeah, independent visitors are also, but we will sort out the website. Thank you for that.
Councillor Itrat Ali, please.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much. Thank you, Viv, for that informative report. I just wanted to make a few comments in light of my recent visit to Kirklees Fostering Network Support Group. Before I actually start, I just wanted to say, Viv, they spoke very highly of you, and to quote them, they said, did you bribe them with a badge? Because they did say, Viv listens, she really cares, and we really value the work that she does. So thank you on their behalf. I had quite a lengthy meeting with them discussing some of their challenges that they face, and I thought it was quite important to highlight that today. So they say that there's been a massive drop-off in the number of foster carers, from 200 to nearly 100 that have dropped off in recently. One of the things that they cited that's quite an easy thing that the council could do, so currently the Kirklees Fostering Network group run a support group. It's a 24-hour helpline for carers. And so they run this themselves, and it's to support other carers within that network, as well as looking after their own children. And they cited that it would be useful, I know obviously budgets are tight, but to have a designated number at the council where they could tap in for support, which they feel that sometimes is lacking. Occasionally it's just a case of a chat or just have some direction into where they're going. The other thing that they cited, and I know there's a lack of foster carers, and I know we're working on recruiting new ones, but retention of existing foster carers. So there's been a big drop-off of when foster carers leave. The group highlighted that it would be useful to have a social worker to actually ask those questions and to see why they're dropping off. One example that they gave was that last year there was the council highlighted that there was no babies available for fostering, so those carers that had been only interested in babies had just dropped off, and there was no anything in place, any means to keep them on the list and retention, because now they've had an influx of newborns and there isn't the foster carers out there. So it was just highlighting a few of those points that you might want to take up.
Yeah, no, I welcome those. Thank you very much. There is always a drop-off. We said we'll have 20 new ones that by the end of this financial year. But, you know, at the other end, people retire. People's health deteriorates and they feel they can't continue. Some go to private companies because they think, oh, they pay more, and they do. But they don't provide the support that Kirklees does. And let's face it, the private companies aren't doing it for altruistic reasons. They're doing it for profit, aren't they? And that money comes out of Kirklees' budget and at a greater rate rather than keeping it to spend on our children in Kirklees. And of course, staying put. I love it when somebody says, oh, we're doing staying put. Gladys is staying with us, now she's 18. They're no longer a foster carer. Unless they've got an extra bedroom and they're going to take another child. So we lose people all the time, and that's, you know, part of life. I think I understood, and the practice is different now, I understood that there was a sort of exit interview process, and I'm getting a thumbs up, and in actual fact they should come to fostering panel for it to be agreed that their fostering status is finished. But they where people, you know, if there are no babies and they're suddenly got, and that's all that foster care is going to do, I'd really want us to look at what that means, and, you know, they should be kept on the list and provided with a placement as and when, you know. So I am concerned about that. The dedicated number, do you mean a dedicated number for Kirklees Fostering Network?
So that might actually vary, but that was the actual network that actually halved from 200 to 100.
Yeah, I don't think that's an accurate figure.
Right, that's just what they quoted me, but yeah.
But I thought they had a dedicated number, and Tom's giving me a thumbs up, so I'm not quite sure what that's about, but we're always happy to look at it. If you're happy to drop me a quick note and what have you, I'll pick up those points and go into them, because I welcome anything that helps us like that.
Thank you. Councillor Bramwell, please.
Thank you. I don't have any questions, more just comments and a little bit of an invitation to come to our ward and engage on this in particular.
You mean come and talk about it?
Well, talk about it, but also educate the public and all to see how they can get involved. I think it's absolutely vital. So obviously I attended the parenting board meeting, which was this week, and there was a lot of good information in there. And I think that, you know, as councillors, we're standing here a lot and we scrutinise and we pull apart and we do what we need to do. But I think it's important to recognise the amount of work that's gone in particular with Viv and the officers involved.
No, it's the service who does it, not
I know, but it's everyone has a part to play. It's a team effort, and I think it's important to recognise how far this service in itself has come over the past few years, and, you know, a lot of good work's been put into it. And one of the positives that came out of the meeting that I attended this week was how they engage with the young people that have already been through the service. It's something that, you know, I put a question and the feedback was, it was really, really good. There was young people that were sat on the board. They were able to express themselves. They were able to, you know, explain the good, the bad. That was all taken in. It was amended. And that's how we improve as a local authority, as a service. So I think it's absolutely fantastic and something to highlight. And the second thing, like I said, invitation to come over to our ward and educate people on how to get involved, because I'm sure there's so many families that want to help, they probably just don't know how to, so educating the public on that.
Thank you, send me an invitation. I'll go anywhere and talk to anyone.
Councillor Hall, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you as always, Viv. Just a quick question. What proportion of our foster carers go on to adopt?
It's a really good question. I haven't a clue, but it's tiny according to the signal I'm getting from Tom. People want to foster but don't necessarily want to adopt. Sometimes there's that huge emotional connection that the family has with the child, and that child wants to stay with them for good, and they want that child, and then adoption happens. But not that many.
Thank you. Councillor Greaves, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Viv, and for a great presentation as well. I think everybody would agree that the work of foster carers is vital. I think perhaps people don't see the issues that pop up where the foster service is where it's stretched or unable to support, and if somebody can't stay with a family and they can't get foster care, if they then go into a residential home, the costs involved in that, and I suppose in some respects maybe the quality of the environment as well, for the child can be an issue. But there's a lot of money that gets spent within foster and residential care, and there's a lot of pressures on the people who are delivering that service, and you've commented that there's lots of support that Kirklees provides to foster carers that's maybe lacking elsewhere. But one of the issues that's been flagged up to me by some foster carers who live in my area is about the changes to Knoll House. So could you just talk us through some of the support that's available to foster carers, and with the changes at Knoll House, what kind of respite support is going to be available to them in the future? I think it's still a little bit up in the air, but it's an area that's causing a bit of concern within the foster families.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know Knoll House very well. I visited it. I wouldn't want to go and use it for its purpose that it's used for, but there we are. When families looked after children or young people have family members that they're still allowed to have contact with, can be siblings, can be grandparents, can be parents. Very often they go for what's called contact, or more recently, family time. And Knoll House has been used in Murfield as a family time hub. Now, some children and young people have to have very supervised family time because of issues within the family. Others don't. And really, to go and sit in, I don't know, is it Edwardian or Victorian Knoll House? Anybody know? It's a big old building. To go and sit in a room, great while you're a little and there's some toys to play with. When you're 13 or 14 and your parents or your auntie and uncle come to have family time with you, what are you going to do? How was school today? Okay. What are you doing tomorrow? Don't know. It don't give a valuable family time, although that is the normal conversation. I do accept that. But really what's being looked at is family time should be better. It should be in the community. It could be in the park, in a cafe, it could be bowling, it's having fun. And in fact, one young person was at the parenting board this week who talked about family time, and he said, I was in foster care in Huddersfield. My sibling, my sister, was in Birstall, and we both had to plod across to this place in Murfield, and it was awful. And that says it all. My desire is for the best outcomes for our young people, and being, having family time should be valuable, shouldn't it? It should be a bit of fun, it should be, and for some, it won't be quite like that because of the supervision needs, and if they're still under a court order process, it has to be supervised. But we're looking at better places, and the idea is to stop doing them at Knoll House. The first time I went to visit it, I went, oh God, I wouldn't want to have to come here and sit in here. And it's a big building, high ceilinged room, and you just sat there. If you're an older child or young person, to have, you know, trying to maintain a conversation with your grandparents who you haven't seen for 3 weeks, with nothing to focus on. Much better, you can go have a sticky bun and a coffee in a cafe, or you go to the park, or you go to the swimming pool, or you have fun with your family. And the idea is we'd set a target date that perhaps Knoll House would close by the 31st of March. It probably won't by then, because we have to make sure there's a lot of children and young people to sort out who need family time, where appropriate places are. But it will happen, and that is the intention. But there is nothing that will stop family time and that support, both the foster carers and our children and young people who are looked after. That will continue. All right.
Councillor Donna, please.
Oh, he wants to come back.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Donna.
It's probably going to come back with it.
Yeah, you might as well keep going on the same thing.
But thanks for that. I think the family that I spoke to, their concern was around where they've got safeguarding issues, where that appropriate supervision is required. So I totally get it. For a lot of people, it's not an appropriate environment. So it's great to hear that the closure date is likely to be pushed on.
It's flexible until we've sorted it out for everybody.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that's so. The concern is that so far, alternative, suitable, safe spaces haven't really been found and shared with the affected foster carers. So I think that if there's anything to take forward, it is the fact that maybe changing the system, yes, but those families who need that safeguarded supervision because of issues within the family, I think that they need to know where we are on that journey. Yeah. So they absolutely need to know that Knoll House is going to be, well, that provision's going to be there one way or another until we've gone through this transition period. There was a lot of concern that they were just going to be left with very inadequate arrangements. So
yeah.
I think the important bit would be maybe to just make sure that communication with those relevant families is in place.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I have to apologise because I think the communication hasn't been good, as does Tom. We both feel that it hasn't served a purpose, it hasn't reassured families. We may not know the answer, but the reassurance is if you need safeguard at family time, you will continue to have it. I just don't want kids and young people travelling an hour to spend an hour in a room in a house to travel back an hour. It's just not good. But you're right, the communication hasn't been good and we are working on getting that right now. But thank you.
Sorry,
Thank you. I'll not go into all what Councillor Greaves has gone into. I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation. And I'm 100%, we have got some fantastic foster carers in Kirklees. And we've got some really good staff as well, some fantastic social workers and family time team, which I am concerned about. You know, I want to make sure the family time team does stay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm more than happy to promote getting more foster carers. As you know, I sit on the foster care panel, so we do, if anybody does want to be a foster carer, the chances are they'll come to the panel and they'll get to see me.
That might put people off, don't it?
No, it's an absolutely fantastic panel. But just on what Councillor Ali brought up, there is a resignation. If they do resign, it does come to the panel. Yeah. Not all the foster carers then attend that, but they are always invited to come
to
There's
the
usually
panel.
a letter, isn't there, as to
Yeah,
why they resign
yeah.
and what have you, yeah.
Because we do look at accepting that resignation as well and what the reasons are. But yeah, but I would say if anybody wants ever to have a go at foster parents, it's an absolutely fantastic panel, fantastic staff, and I would absolutely love to promote getting more foster carers in Kirklees. So, thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bellamy. Can I just say I sat on fostering panel for about 7 years, and I know how onerous the work is. So I know how hard you're working in the papers, and I know you've been under the cosh. Happily now, Councillor Sewell's approval to be on fostering panel has finally come through, so she will be taking part as well to ease the burden a bit. But can I thank you for all the work that you put in, because it is so important.
Thank you. Councillor Darwin, please.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Councillor Kendrick. The presentation that you've shown, I can see the changes and the way that you've tried to improve the service. There's one problem in terms of recruitment, because a lot of people are still under the old perception, what they can't do, what they can do. They've had bad experiences and things like that. And I agree with Councillor Bramwell that it's important to sell this service to the community. And that's what needs to be done. Because having spoken to a lot of people who have wanted to foster children, they had very, very bad experiences. So, yeah. And in terms of young people now being allowed to sponsor, like 21 plus and that, people weren't aware of that. And I've seen a few cases in my community where that has happened and they're not even married, so which is absolutely brilliant, because they thought you'd have to be a two-parent family.
Right. No,
so,
you can be single,
that's one.
Couple, any gender,
and
we don't mind.
So
any religion, any ethnicity.
Okay. And secondly, the literature that you've given, what I see, Dewsbury Town Hall and an Asian family, and I see Huddersfield, I'm not knocking you, I'm just going to come to the point, yeah? Huddersfield with an English family. I think we need to be looking at this from a diverse point of view. It would be nice to see families as just opposed to that. And I'm saying that because of my experiences in communities, where people, they just talk about a race or a different faith and that. But we had a good chance of having a diverse community on here. Yeah, maybe next time.
Yeah, they aren't real families, they aren't real foster
I know that, but I'm talking about promoting literature.
Yeah, I take your point and we will look at it, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Darwin. Councillor Aliasha, please.
Viv, thank you. Your passion is just immeasurable here.
Sorry, Councillor Ashad. Can we just have one meeting in here, please? I'm struggling to hear the member. If you want to have separate meetings, you can leave and have one out there. But just one meeting in here, please.
And
Sorry,
I would want to
Councillor
repeat that again. Thank you 3 times. Your passion here is immeasurable. As your ward colleague, I could have brought this up afterwards, but I do want to bring it up now. One of the statistics that you mentioned, seasoned, loving, caring, quite possibly elder generation, or potential ill health situations where we've got foster carers that are dropping out. And it's just a brainstorm on a proposition, quite possibly a buddy system. People like myself who can go through the vetting system, make sure we've got the right insurances in place as well. For these foster parents to have that as a support network and a service, I myself would want to be able to, once a fortnight, take out a young man, teach him life skills that I can teach, but then also be there at the other end of the phone. If a foster carer doesn't retire, stays around, but they believe they've got somebody who can turn up at short notice and help and support. Maybe that's an avenue, because I'm looking at a demographic of people that are like myself who cannot fully commit as much as we'd love to, but we want to be there and do something. And again, I'm only talking about this because the passion that you've shown, I've got the passion of the idea, and others would want to do the same thing, because we don't want to fully go in, but we want to be there. And I guess when we get called upon, we will absolutely make sure that we're there for the foster carer and the young person.
Thank you for that. Put his name down for the independent visitor scheme, please, Tom. I have to say, Kirklees Fostering Network is a force not to be reckoned with. They are brilliant at providing support to our foster carers. And of course, social workers are the other thing. But that idea of a community buddying scheme, that's a conversation Tom and I will have now that you've suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Echoing the sentiment of everyone, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you very much for everything you do, not just in terms of fostering, but all child services. Just a few points. So first of all, I don't know much about fostering. I've only been in the council 2 years. There's a lot of things to take in, and I do my best. And so unless somebody contacts me directly about it, I tend not to know. I don't do the research into it. So I get that. So one thing I would like in future is when we do something like this to be sent the information in advance, so I can read it and then I can approach it with a bit more research. Also, going back to the point in our ward, as Councillor Bellamy and Councillor Greaves have spoken about regarding Noel House. One of the things you gave was great anecdotal evidence of you going there and saying it's high ceilings and things like that, and it may well be because I haven't visited.
Quite intimidating.
Yeah, quite intimidating. But the best thing, whenever we close anything, what we tend to as a council, we tend to speak to those who use it and get some sort of consultation on it and speak to those that use it, because it may be that 90% of the people go, well, it's better than the house I've got, or it's far enough away from my house that I feel I'm in somewhere safer. I don't know. But there should be some sort of consultation there in advance. And then at least the communication would be there, because all the people using it would then be aware that the consultation is happening and there's a potential closure. And then you could say, well, we know what sort of things we're looking for. It's bowling alleys we might be taking them to. It's certain cafes. It's places like that. But without a consultation, we're just hoping that we know best, which is always dangerous in something like this. So I would welcome some sort of consultation, because the person who contacted us essentially said, I think I've heard about it closing, I'm not sure, I really like it. So that would be in contrast to what you've said, but I've never been. In fact, I didn't know it existed until I was told it was closing, so it would be good to have some sort of consultation on that. And the last thing is, I think in terms of having people join becoming a foster parent, I think we see it in the news, or we always hear horror stories. We always hear the bad news that, you know, they came from a family like this and that's why their behaviours have gone like this, and that's why I might not foster in the future. But you've mentioned that there are a number of people who aren't classed as foster parents anymore because their children are older than 16. Well, those are those people who've kept the child on over 16 or gone on to adopt. I know it's a minority, as you said earlier. And those are the real case studies we should be seeing. So I would like to see more case studies of positive outcomes as an advertisement for those to come in and say, yeah, there are occasions where things go wrong and we do have the support, but look how many people kept them on after 16. Look how many people went on to adopt them, because those people show that actually that is really rewarding and it's had a life-changing effect for the positive, and we want to see more examples of that as an advert. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. As far as Noel House goes, I get it that some carers will say they like it, and they'll like it because it feels secure, and perhaps they need safeguarded family time, perhaps because it's a distance from their home, and we would look at safe places and a distance from their home if it was important. But one of the key things for me is, what do our children and young people think of it? Because they're at the heart of this. I'm sorry that the foster carers are, if you like, supplementary to that issue. But I take your point. I think your comment about having information beforehand is fair. I was only offered the stuff yesterday or the day before yesterday, and they left it at the desk downstairs for me, but I'll try and do better for you.
I'm not saying it's your fault.
No, I'm not asking to excuse myself. I'm just saying I will do it better if you let me speak ever again.
Thank you. Councillor Darren O'Donovan, please.
Thanks, Mayor.
I'll start by just commenting from the comments of Councillor McGrath. I think it's quite right what you said, but I think that's the reason why Councillor Kendrick is here today. It's the opportunity, and Viv's come every year since I can remember, to highlight and remind this chamber about what fostering services do. This is not new information, it's information that is out there in the public domain, it's on our website. And yes, we're all busy and we don't always look at the fostering page of the Kirklees Council website. There's lots of other issues, I get that. You know, notwithstanding issues around town halls and gritting in schools, etc. It's all important. But I think one tangible thing we can all do tonight, if you don't mind me saying, is that we could all use our social media reach tonight, couldn't we? To tweet, to post the Kirklees fostering page. And if there are 60 councillors in this room, because there's a few apologies, and 10 of our followers read our post tonight, that's 600 people that are starting to explore. And just reading the website is the beginning of that exploration. I have some insight into this because in a different authority I work with families whose children are under child protection orders or children are in foster care. And the reach can be huge, and that initial exploratory conversation that people have with themselves, with their spouse or with their partner, whoever it might be, starts when somebody or a group of people put the information out there. And we can do that tonight. I don't mean to throw down the gauntlet to people, but I can't imagine anybody would not want to do that. So tonight, before we go home, we could easily tweet or post the Kirklees Council site around fostering to start that exploratory conversation that people have tonight or tomorrow morning, to read things that they've never read before, to answer questions that they've never had answered before. It'd be really easy to do that, and I'm going to do it tonight because I think we can get a really good reach on that. And again, notwithstanding all the big issues of the council, there are lots of issues around different services, but arguably this has to be the most important part of what we do as a council. It has to be, doesn't it? Yeah. And I'm glad that you're here once a year, Viv. I really am glad that you're here, because the people that we look after aren't necessarily the ones that are going to come with petitions and deputations and start shouting and placarding us. But that's why we're here. We're here on behalf of looked after children, to be the placard banner holder, be the badge wearer, etc. And be the promoter and the marketeer or whatever it might be for the services that need to support these babies, toddlers and young people. So it goes right from babies right through. So I think one thing we can do is let's tweet and post about, you know, starting a conversation about fostering for people in people's living room. Let's start that conversation. Even if it's just once a year, it's a good start. And let's remember the value of this service, obviously, when we get to budget time in February. There are lots of demands on the council, but we have to be able to protect and grow services like these when they need growing and if they need growing. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Excellent idea about social media. I'm a bit rubbish at it, but I do try. But other people who are more proficient, I would welcome your help in promoting this. Thank you. Are we done?
Councillor Addy.
Oh.
So I asked before, that what happens if you haven't got a spare room, and you tell me about the possibility of fostering babies. This is more at the other end, and obviously if you haven't got a spare room, you can be an independent visitor, and hopefully you might have a new one already on the books. Is that where the supported lodgings coming in? If they're in the later teens and they're staying in a premises on their own, do you support them, or do they come to your house? A bit of clarification.
They come to your house. I'm looking at Tom to make sure. Yes, it's a bit about you still need a spare bedroom. They can't share a bedroom with you.
But that fostering later on does take you through into adulthood. But I know fostering isn't really meant to lead to adoption, is it? Because then you lose a foster carer. So we do need adopters as well, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Separately.
We don't have many adopters, I have to say, but we do have some.
Councillor Fair.
Oh, I'm growing roots.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Viv, for an excellent presentation. It comes through quite clearly. It's not just a presentation, you do care. But it has been mentioned a couple of times, I think we need to explore it. The training to be a foster parent, is it onerous?
Unless it's changed since I was on foster panel, it's fairly intense. It isn't that you've got to go this week, this week, this week, but there are certain training courses that you must complete before you can be accredited as a foster carer. It may be because of circumstances, you may have a gap of 2 or 3 months before you do the next one, but you must have completed the basics of understanding about children and young people, and actually some of the sort of trauma that may have impacted them, how young people's brains develop, that sort of thing, you know. And it isn't easy sailing, you know. I mean, it isn't always. Any of us who have or have had teenagers will know how lovely that is at times. But, you know, we live through it because we care.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. From what I can see, there are no more speakers, so I just want... Oh, are you okay? You all right?
Yeah, Councillor Kendrick just died.
So we're going to bring that to a close. And can I just thank you, Councillor Kendrick, for the presentation. Thank you. Okay, so we are now going to move on to agenda item 13, which is the motion for the 2-child limit to benefit payments. Can I ask Councillor Munro to move, please?
I'd like to propose this motion we've submitted it in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 14 as to 2-child limit to benefit payments. Thank you.
Is that seconded?
That, Madam Mayor, reserve the right.
Thank you. We also have received an amendment from the Labour Group. Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just say a couple of things to introduce and propose this Labour Group amendment. So I think that members will agree that the marked increase in the numbers of children living in poverty over the last decade and a half is an indictment on all of us. This is a particularly relevant issue for our region, with 1/3 of all children in Kirklees falling into this category. These situations are always complex, with multiple factors involved in each individual case. But again, I think most of us agree the 2-child benefit cap mentioned here has been a contributory factor. From the perspective of the Kirklees Labour Group, many of us, myself included, feel that this situation needs to be addressed urgently. No children should have to live in poverty. We very much support the work being done by this government through the Child Poverty Task Force and other initiatives to find a responsible and sustainable way to reverse the recent trend and start to reduce the number of individuals suffering deprivation.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Is that seconded? Councillor Pattison.
Yes, thank you. I second it and reserve the right. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments on the motion or amendments? Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, I think child poverty is something that all of us would want to take serious as possible as politicians at a national and local level. We had an interesting curtailed debate on the winter fuel payments at the last council meeting, and much strides have been making to reduce pensioner poverty over the last decade and a half. And strides have been made, particularly over the last 25 years, to reduce child poverty, particularly significant reductions in levels of child poverty during the latter years of the previous Labour government, the one that ended in 1997. Don't quite agree with what Councillor Crook has said about, we seem to think about, we seem to look at the last 15 years and blame everything on the coalition government and the previous Conservative government. And actually, during the coalition government, the downward pressure on both absolute and relative poverty was continued. It certainly did not rise to levels that it was at the end of the previous Labour government in 1997. So it's a false narrative, and we'd like to think, everything got worse in 1997. That is not true. And even today, levels of child poverty are much lower than they have been at historic levels, but they have been rising, particularly since 2017. And again, there might be a temptation for some of this chamber to blame everything on the coalition. But actually what we see is the difference between the policies taken during the coalition government, which was actually trying to stabilise things. We did see a downward trend in absolute poverty before housing costs. There were issues around housing costs, that's what the figure suggests. But there was a key change. And I think even some members of the previous Conservative government at the latter day said this policy has not done what was intended. And I would say it's actually a mean policy. Conservative colleagues might want to rise to that challenge. What we would see is if we remove the two-child policy, we'd actually see at least £3,000 a year going into the poorest households, £62 a week. We just had to imagine how far that would go to families who are trying to feed their families or trying to pay for fuel. And it would actually, it would outstrip the current higher levels of fuel costs. Why we're not supporting the amendment that the Labour group have put forward is because it's extracted all responsibility from the current Labour government for trying to reduce child poverty. And I understand that some colleagues in the Labour group will feel uncomfortable about it, and they probably want to see the two-child cap removed. If anything that should have been a priority for the current government, it should be that. It's £1.3 billion, and with the current fluctuations in capital markets and everything, it's a lot of money, but it's a relatively small amount of money. The impact of doing this now on families and children, actually the reductions in the costs on the rest of us, we reckon there's about £39 billion worth of costs from children and for families in children's policy. So it's something that can be done now. It will save all of us, taxpayers, money in the short to long term, but it will make an immediate difference in the 250,000 households that are in absolute poverty, and the other 1.5 million who suffer from this, who are suffering from this, or the 850,000 who are suffering from this. So I urge the council to reject the amendment and support the original motion, just to express our views. We've done really well in this chamber to express the views of us for our residents, the things we want to do too, and this is a chance for us to say actually this is something relatively simple, relatively cost effective, which will actually make a big difference to a lot of households and to us as a society. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. Councillor Kendrick, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't think I'd had much chance to speak tonight, so I thought I'd try now. As a retired welfare rights worker, benefit advisor for this authority, since 1979, I have deplored the erosion of benefits. Did you know, at one time, if you were unemployed, you got an amount on your employment benefit for your partner and for each child you had? Did you know, if you were sick, you got an amount for your partner and each child you had, because you still had to feed them and clothe them and heat their home. And you got less. You get much less maternity benefit now than you ever did. Now we can play about this as a political football, can't we? But actually, if we really care about doing something positive to help reduce, I don't think it will get rid of child poverty. I think a lot more has to be done. But if we can step aside from saying, oh, it was you, and oh, it was you, and I don't know whether my colleagues will be happy with me, but this is my personal view, then actually I will support the Labour amendment, because it doesn't say, I think, unless I've read it wrongly, it's your fault or it's your fault. Let's stop playing politics with this and do the right thing about helping reduce child poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Councillor David Hall, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't intend to speak to the motion. I have my own personal views, strong views about this. I'm not going to tell you what they are. I do intend, however, to speak on the amendment. As much as we admire you, Councillor Kendrick, you're entirely wrong. Because what this amendment does is not take the politics out of it. It injects the politics into it. And in fact, even stronger than that, what it does, it actually expunges statements of truth from the original motion. So let's have a see what the amendment does. Amend paragraph 1 to read: And it says there, you know, oh, all the Tories' fault, all this stuff. What it's expunged from it is, is supported by the Labour government. Now, this particular policy is supported by the Labour government. They have continued this policy. The Prime Minister is on record as saying this is the government's policy. The Prime Minister has removed the whip from several of his own Labour members in Parliament because they voted against this policy. So how you can remove and is supported by the Labour government just beggars belief, because that is a statement of truth. If we go further down, what's missing under amend the text? You've amended the text to read, this is a harmful policy, and you've amended it to say this has been a harmful policy. As if the policy has stopped. The policy is continuing. It has been expressed by the Prime Minister that this is the government's policy. The Prime Minister has withdrawn the whip from some of his Labour members because they said they didn't agree with this policy. So you are changing from a statement of truth to try and expunge exactly what is happening there. The policy has suddenly ceased to be like Monty Python's parrot. And this just seems to me, as this kind of expunging of the truth, this kind of smokescreen is actually becoming the way that this Labour cabinet operates, because we've also heard from the Leader of the Council earlier on that, we're only enacting the last budget. Well, you all voted for the last budget when you were in a majority, when you had 39 councillors. You all voted for it, and yeah, you're having to carry it out. It isn't as if you haven't had any hand in this. Again, we're expunging the truth from things. This is, whether you agree with it or not, some of you will, some of you won't. This is Labour policy, and it's no good putting an amendment to say, well, actually, it's not Labour policy, because it is. So you've got to decide, do you agree with it or do you don't, or do you not? It's as simple as that. If I were you, I'd withdraw this amendment before it gets nominated for a Booker Prize for fiction.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor McGrath, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just going to something that Councillor Marchington said, and in the motion it says, scrapping the two-child limit would cost 1.3 billion. However, it is estimated that a child poverty costs the economy over 39 billion a year. But you spoke about short and medium term. Or in fact, I think you might have even mentioned long term. But certainly I have two children. Sorry, long term. You said long term. Okay. Okay. So, all three. So, I've got two children, and like most, I would imagine, when they become a parent or are thinking about trying to become a parent, some unfortunately can't become parents, they think about the life they want to give their children. And I question whether I can have a third child, because I'd want the two children I have to have a better upbringing and a better life than I have. I want to take on better holidays and enjoy better food and have a better life than I had. And that should be the hope for every parent, to offer a better life than they were given growing up, because it's not your fault that the family you're born into. And it's nothing that you can control as a child, so you want to give them every opportunity. So with that in mind, the 1.3 billion is definitely short term, because that's right now, right? I presume 1.3 billion pounds is how much it would cost right now, with the number of children right now going from not getting it to getting it. Well, if there's a number of people budgeting, if I have more children and there is no cap, I'll have 5, I'll have 6. And if that is the case, then that 1.3 billion is short term, because long term, you're not considering any impact of the extra funds you will have for more children. So, I mean, I don't know whether I'll back this motion or not. I just question whether it's fair to just put the 1.3 billion on it and say that's how much it will cost now. That figure could quite easily spiral if people think, well, I can now afford to have more children because more money's coming. If more money's coming, who's paying for it and where's it coming off? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Cooper, please.
So I look at this, the Chief Executive has been asked to write a letter in the Labour amendment, and it says, instruct the Chief Executive to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Prime Minister, thanking them for their work, putting an end to child poverty and for ending the cruel austerity policies of the previous administration. But has austerity gone? Is austerity disappeared suddenly? Is all of a sudden the council's coffers full of money? Are people out of poverty? Is all those things stopping? Are we now in the beautiful, lovely world of a Labour government where everything is rosy? I don't think austerity's finished. I think austerity's carried on. And I think austerity's carrying on because of the policies of this government. You might say it's better than the Tories. Well, that's not hard. But it's carrying on. So I wonder, how many food banks are going to close under this Labour government? How many council houses are going to be built? When will we get rid of the waiting list for council houses that many children in low incomes will have to end in? So I look at this and I think this is fantasy. It really is. It's nonsense. There will still be poverty, and we're not putting the building blocks in place to actually address poverty and to deal with that. So yes, I will be opposing the Labour amendment, and I will not. I don't have to apologise or cover for this government.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Andrew Pinnock, please.
Can you take Councillor Munro first, please?
Do you want to take Councillor Munro first?
Before me, sorry. Yes.
Reasonable request.
Right.
Because she was the second.
Right, okay. I've not gone to the right of reply, though. She will get that opportunity. Yeah, but,
amendment.
Yeah, for the amendment. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Just
to the right of reply. Speakers of right of reply.
Yeah, Councillor Munro.
Right. So, I don't know, is my mic on? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's gone wrong, but anyway.
No, it's fine.
I just wanted to say, people have obviously spoken before me and touched on some of these points, so it's evident there's a strong correlation between poverty and the two-child benefit cap. Poverty is damaging. Poverty impacts a child's well-being, their anxiety and stress levels increase, it impacts their self-esteem, their confidence, their achievements at school, their opportunities, their friendships. It may lead to disaffection at school, it may lead to addiction of some kind, it may lead them into getting involved with gangs, it may impact their mental health. Many families in Kirklees have been dragged into poverty as a result of the two-child limit cap. Parents will be struggling with increases in energy prices and hikes in the cost of levelling, juggling tight budgets, dealing with stress. According to reports, the two-child benefit policy has had limited impact on forcing parents out of work. 60% of them already work, often working shift patterns to fit around the families. Other parents may struggle due to ill health, low wages, the death of a partner. So I'm asking you, I'm actually asking you to support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor James Homewood, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I'm supporting the Labour Group amendment. I think what I'm hearing, listening to what everyone said, is I think we've all got, or generally, not everybody, we've got a general agreement across the chamber that we'd like to see a priority be for the government to address this issue and to reverse this two-child benefit cap. I support that. I guess it's just the means to the end of how we do that and how we position that from the council's motion. But I did just want to point out a little bit about the context of this, because when looking back to the last meeting and then what's on the agenda this meeting, we've got a series of motions that are about the budget in effect and the different impacts of that. In different view to Councillor Cooper, I think when we had the budget last year, what we saw was the Labour Party take a very different approach to what the Tories had been doing, looking to raise revenue so that we could invest in public services and to, from our perspective, reverse some of the things that we thought the Tories were doing wrong in terms of the austerity policies. I appreciate it doesn't go far enough for everybody, but I think when you look at how sensitive the markets are, what happened with Liz Truss, etc., you can understand how we can't do everything all at once. Personally, I think that child poverty and the two-child cap should be at the top of that priority list because I think it can have a significant benefit on people. But I will be interested as we go through these motions, whether we get them today or not, how people vote here in terms of, I'm going to guess that we might see a lot of people against measures that raised additional taxes to pay for things such as these types of policies or other public service investment, and against any forms of cuts that may have had to be made or hard decisions that may have to be made. I appreciate it's all about choices, it's a difficult one, but I think it's the government are in a difficult position, and I think what we're trying to say is we do believe as a Labour Party that we're looking at this issue. We want to make sure that the government hear our voice in Kirklees, that child poverty is an issue for us and want to do something about it. But I think we just don't agree with the view that it's the Liberal Democrats who have the golden answer on all these questions, because I don't think it is personally. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to support the motion, and really my reason for doing this is to emphasise the points which have already been made about the effect of having a two-child cap and all the results that come from that. They're laid out in paragraph 2 with all the bullet points there, and the important one is the cost of 1.3 billion. We have a problem sometimes of working out what things actually cost, and because it's easier to put some things in an account, lines in a budget. You can see those. Some of those things are quite difficult to put into those budget lines. And I think what that last bullet point tries to do is some of the intangible things that not providing benefits to third and fourth children actually does. Earlier on, Councillor Hall's contribution, I think, said a lot to me about the Labour amendment, which endeavoured to take out all reference to the current government. Now, the whole point of that being in the motion is because the Labour Party are actually in government, and therefore they are likely to get attacked for things that they do or don't do, or do in a way that other people would rather it was a bit different. So I urge members in this chamber to vote for the original motion, not the amendment, simply because we have tried in formulating this motion to I was going to say apportion the blame. That's perhaps a rather crude way of putting it, to actually make the point that Councillor Hall did of saying, well, the current government actually supports in a way, what the previous Conservative government tried to do in this respect. And we don't like either of those. And we think that for all the reasons that are laid out in the motion, there is a disproportionate effect on vulnerable sections of the community, which needs to be sorted out and quickly.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Councillor Turner, please.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Clearly I will be supporting this Lib Dem Central Office motion, as many councillors up and down the country have had exactly the same one. So it's not very original, is it? It's interesting. As an older person, my children are grown up. So I have no idea until just literally 30 seconds ago what the child benefit payments are. And I've done it's £16.95 a child. So I don't understand how people are going to have more children because they're going to get a few quid extra. I don't think that stacks up. But I can't support this motion. I am convinced that during the term of this Labour government, once we've managed to get the economy sorted and in a straight line, we will abolish the two-child cap. I am convinced that that is going to come, but we can only do that as a responsible government when the finances allow. We inherited, and they're going to moan now, a mess. Rachel is trying to sort it out. Once we are on an even keel, once we've got growth in the economy, we will remove the two-child debt. I am sure of that.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Munro, there's no more speakers, so Councillor Munro, right of reply.
Cede my right of reply, and I think Councillor Mortridge is going to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for allowing that. I think what we can all agree on, and that's been good about the debate, is that we all want to end child poverty, and that doesn't just have an impact on the families who are in poverty, but it has an impact on the whole of society. Firm foundation for the future. I think the phrase that's been used by all governments is every child matters, and we know that.
Councillor Matchington, can we have a bit of quiet in this chamber, please?
I just want to address some of the issues that have been put forward, not many. Primarily, Councillor McGrath, understand what you're saying. The reason why this proposal was brought in 2017 was to, in the view that it might make people think before they had more children. I'll just anecdotally, my grandmother was the youngest of 16. When my Uncle Ron was born, my dad's brother, my great-granny said to me, Nanny, you'll stop at 2, won't you? That's in 1946, so there's a key shift. My mother is a twin, so she got an elder brother. My mum and Uncle Harold were born at the same, so they became a family of 3 automatic. I don't think the cap applies in that sort of situations to multiple births. But I think even the previous Conservative government realised this has not done what the intention was, to make people think about the size of their families. So to assure Councillor McGrath, who I hope he will support the motion, there's not any expectations that there was spiralling costs. People will be having bigger and bigger families because we're removing the two-child benefit cap. What there will be is we'll be removing significant numbers of children out of child poverty, and there's a consequential benefit for our communities and for society as a whole. I think, like Councillor Turner made the mistake that some of us will have made. It's not about £16 child benefit, which everybody's, you don't know everybody, unless your individual income is over 50,000 quid, you still get your child benefit that my mum used to get. And when I went to university, my mum was really moaning she didn't get any more. It's not worth it. What we're talking about here, and I know, Councillor Turner, you will not be old enough to apply for this, but I did. Child tax credits brought in by the previous Labour government, horrendously complicated, set a bit of legislation, but it did bung money into to a lot of homes. It's child tax credit and working families tax credit. It's the tax credit, the universal credit, and that's the system we're talking about. And it's not about £16 a week. You're talking about £62 a week, treble that. It's about the basic benefits which people use to pay the food bills, to pay the housing costs, and to pay the fuel bills. That's what it's about. So I appreciate what you're saying. I'm sure the Labour Party never sends out motions that have been, is it still Smith Square, is that the one, or wherever it used to be, or Millbank, wherever the mines are. So I would encourage people to not vote for the Labour amendment, because we were made promises and I don't think they're being kept. And I would encourage everybody to vote for the Liberal Democrat motion, which is about saying that we all think that this cap is not working. It will remove significant numbers of children from poverty, and it will make a big difference, not in just their lives, but the whole of society as we set children off with a firmer financial foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. So we'll now go to the vote and we're going to use our consoles. So the order of votes, we're going to vote for the Labour amendment first. Okay, that falls. Okay, that falls. We will now vote for the substantive motion. There we go. So, okay. That also falls. Okay, moving on to agenda item 14.
Motion not carried.
Sorry, motion not carried. Moving on to agenda item 14, which is the people shuffling about. Okay, family farm tax. Could I ask Councillor Taylor to propose, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to propose this motion this evening. And I would like to formally move the motion. Colleagues, I've risen today to move this motion on an issue of profound importance to our communities. The devastating impact of the so-called family farm tax announced in the recent autumn budget. The decision by the Labour government is not just a betrayal of trust, but a direct assault on the very fabric of rural life here in Kirklees. Our family farms are not just businesses. They are the custodians of our countryside, protectors of our natural environment, and cornerstones of our local food supply. They represent generations of hard work, dedication, and a way of life that has sustained communities for centuries. Yet, with one stroke of a pen, this government has jeopardised their future. The Labour government promised, explicitly promised, not to introduce a tax like this during the election. And yet here we are, facing a policy that will make it harder for farmers to pass on their farms to the next generation. The result? Many family farms will be forced to sell up, threatening our food security, eroding rural economies, and breaking apart the communities that these farms support. Replaced by whom? Large international conglomerates interested in profit, not animal husbandry, or conservation of our unique landscapes. Here in Kirklees, we've already seen the struggles that farmers face, whether it's rising costs, the unpredictable weather, which we've already talked about this evening, and energy prices. They've left many where they're barely making a profit and are on the brink. This new tax is not just an additional burden, it's a tipping point. It sends a message to our farming families that their sacrifices, their labour, their heritage and their way of life are expendable. Colleagues, we must not allow this to go unchallenged. As a council, We have a duty to stand up for our farmers and the vital role that they play in our communities. So support me in urging the Labour government and the leader of this council to write to the Secretary of State and express our dismay at this betrayal. Support me and many others across the country in calling for the government to halt this tax, to reconsider its damaging implications, and to provide real support to our agricultural communities instead of dismantling them. But words are not alone enough. We should also lead by example. By prioritising the use of local produce, we can help sustain our farmers through these turbulent times. Let us engage directly with our farming communities to understand how this council can better support them, whether through advocacy, policy, or practical measures like buying local grown food. Colleagues, Kirklees can't thrive without its rural heart. We owe it to our farmers, to our residents, and to future generations to act now. The motion before you today is a step in the right direction. I urge you all to support it and stand with our farming communities at this time of need. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Is that seconded? Councillor Richard Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to second this motion. I think it's fair. I agree with everything Councillor Taylor said. Farmers in Kirklees are not rich by standards of the Labour Party's view on farmers, I expect, but many people around here in the area that I live in, the area that I represent, they work 7 days a week. Many of them, almost exclusively, I would go as far as to say almost all of them have got second jobs because they're not making enough money from working 7 days a week. It's a vocation. It's not something that's making ludicrous amounts of money. These farms go back several generations, and as soon as you talk about having to sell parts of or all of the farm to pay a large tax bill, you immediately remove a source of food supply to the local area. And, we can't ever replace that once it's gone. So I really do think we should think long and hard about this. And I suspect that this is based upon a view of farmers that is inaccurate. And as John says, if this happens, the people who will benefit most will be the large farms that don't have, that don't have the heart of the community. They're multi-million-pound businesses. They won't be affected by this. The small farmers who come out in their tractors when it's gritting and help the communities, they don't make large amounts of money. And these are the people that are heart of our communities, and we can't really just justify what the Labour government is proposing to do to these people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Are there any comments on the motion? Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Liberal Democrat Group will be supporting the motion, but it's a bit difficult to stomach some of what's been said about this. We fully support the farming communities. Actually, our members of Parliament represent significant parts of rural Britain. But I can give examples of why we need to revise some of the issues around taxation of land, farmland in particular. In my ward, somebody inherited some agricultural land. It happened to be in the designated for housing under the current plan. It was sold for top side of £1 million and it was tax-free. That person never intention of continuing the agriculture, and I've seen farmers in our area not be able to continue because, again, inflation in land prices. Jeremy Clarkson gave us a wonderful example of why people purchasing of farmland and effectively a loophole in the tax legislation. £4 million, because it's in a farm, his children will be able to inherit that without paying inheritance tax, and that's not acceptable. And I think that debate highlighted some of that. So we do, and also we do want a really good agricultural policy. We want to be encouraging people with farmland to maximise food production. We've got a lot to learn from our friends over in the Netherlands about maximising the use of farmland. My wife's from South Lincolnshire, see lots of land in and around between Spalding and Peterborough that is not being cultivated as effectively as it might be. In fact, the thing that brings the most income to that family is to either put solar PV arrays on it and also to sell it for housing. And that cannot be right. So we should be increasing food production in the UK, locally produced food, encouraging people to do that. And we should be supporting our farmers to plan effectively in terms of tax. If a farming family passes on the land to the next generation, or they set it up as an agricultural business, I think a lot of the big estates do, like Chatsworth and everything, that's how they avoid massive amounts of inheritance tax. It's set up as a business or something. Then they could do that. Effective tax planning for those people, encouraging a younger generation to go into farming, to food production, actually using some of the most sophisticated modern methods to doing that, not just driving the little red tractor around and everything. So that is possible. What we do see in and around Kirklees is diversification, things like the weddings up in the home valley and other things like that. They want to do things and stuff like that. But we do want to encourage food production, doing that, and we need a tax system that encourages that but doesn't discourage it. So I think we've talked about the previous motion about being politicised. It's a huge political issue amongst our farming communities. I do think the current Labour government has not thought this through. It wasn't quite as bold as we do need to think about land management, particularly for family farms and small farms. So we will be supporting the motion because we think the tax is inappropriate. We need some more sophisticated discussions about how that happens in Kirklees and the country than we've received so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Regarding this particular piece of legislation about the family farm tax, I can only imagine that there's one of either two reasons that anybody would ever introduce this. Either they hate farmers or they know absolutely nothing about farming and the rural economy. Now, I'm going to give Labour the benefit of the doubt. I don't think Labour hate farmers per se. But so it must be that they actually don't know anything about farming or the rural economy. And I want you to just consider for a minute about the self-employed status of most of our farmers, because they're basically self-employed people who work the land. If you were, drop my glasses. If you were, say, a plumber, and you wanted to earn a living, what have you got to fork out for? You've probably got to spend a bit of money on a plumbing course for a start. You might need a van, overalls, tools, perhaps a bit of equipment. All that is not going to set you back millions of pounds. If you're a farmer, the only way you can even carry out your job, tending livestock or growing crops, whatever it happens to be, is if you have several acres of land. And it's that acres of land which is worth the money. So when you unfortunately pass on and you leave it to your family, if you want your family to continue being the farmers, you have to leave them the land. Not just the land. You have to leave them the barns. You have to leave them the farmhouse. You have to leave them the milking equipment. You have to leave them the tractors. The animals themselves. Now all of this, even agricultural equipment, is a huge cost. It's not buying a van so you can go and do some plumbing and make a living out of it. These things add up to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds. And these are not large farms. These are the local family farms which we see in Kirklees. And what I'd like you to do is look out of your windows and have a look at some of the countryside around here. That countryside only looks like that because of the farmers. There was an old joke, actually, which I'll tell you, about a man looking over his wall at the man next door. And he says to his next door neighbour, "My goodness, you and God have done a good job with that garden." And the man replies, "You should have seen it when God had it to himself." Now, I'm a good Christian, and I wouldn't take the name of the Lord in vain because I think he's got a sense of humour like everybody else. But That countryside you see just doesn't happen. Farmers are out there every day. They're out there Christmas Day. You know, we're making the case we don't have Christmas Day off. I never suggested the bin men should work Christmas Day. The farmers have to work Christmas Day. They're still out there milking. So you've got to understand that even if you set inheritance tax at £2-3 million for a family farm, that is going to catch them. And these are not people that live like a luxury. These are not the people you might want to go after who play football and earn £500,000 a week, or are big celebrities from the point of view of having done nothing in their lives at all apart from appear on a TV programme. These are people that can only carry out the work they do because they have the assets that they have. And wouldn't we be in an absolutely terrible position in this country if the farms weren't there producing the food that we need? Because what will happen is, in order to pay the inheritance tax, the farmer has to sell an asset. Because a lot of these people are not cash rich. They don't got hundreds of thousands of pounds in the bank just to give to the government. So they sell a bit of land. Who is then going to buy that land? Is the next door farmer going to buy that land when it increases his assets and he's going to pay more inheritance tax? No, he isn't. It's the large conglomerates that are going to make the money out of this. They're going to buy the land up. And before you know it, your local landscape, which is tended by our local farmers, will not look like it looks like now. It will look very different. And so not only have we got the livelihoods of the farmers under threat by this particular very ill-thought out piece of legislation, we've actually got our landscape and our food production threatened by it as well. So I do urge you, please, to back this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Ali Arshad.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a son of a farmer, I'm going to have to be wholeheartedly behind this motion. It's really strange standing here saying son of a farmer because for those that know the clan system, I'm a Jat. And we talk about the fact that we've got ancestral land. Some of this in this country here is ancestral land. And then thanks to some friends in the food industry, I have got a bit of an insight. And I'm going to talk about the potato farmers. There's been quite a lot of rain. And when there's a lot of rain in these particular areas, there is no potato crop. Sometimes you have to leave a field fallow. That field is not generating you any money whatsoever, and it needs to be left fallow on a crop rotational basis. We talk about hedges and hedgerows and the wildlife that exists in these hedges and hedgerows. They're going to go. I'm not going to talk about numbers, because when you talk about numbers, I can give you numbers, and somebody opposing me can give me numbers. But we're kind of forcing the small farmer to actually sell his land to be able to pay the land that he's going to inherit, or she's going to inherit, of their father, who've been toiling this land for generations. And the reason they're going to have to sell this land is because it's not cash rich, it's not developmental land, it's land that they're going to have to sell to try and pay that tax that the Labour government is asking of them. And I'm not going to talk about the primary industry, the service industry, the secondary, the manufacturing. Let's go back to the primary industry. That's kind of really getting completely killed off by us and our own, and we really should not be doing that. Food, to the degree that it's getting imported in from Europe and further afield, should not be happening when we should be supporting our own, and we should be growing it here. So in short, what this is going to do, it's going to force that small farmer to sell something that their forefathers, and I'm going to use the term foremothers if it exists, have been toiling the land of for a very long time. And it should not be the case. It should not happen. We should support them all the way, because in future, some of this land is going to turn into, brown belt, and then turn into whatever else. And your large organizations are going to come in and build their houses somewhere along the way. We can say, no, it's not going to happen, but there's a strong possibility, and let's avoid that as much as possible. And let's vote for this motion, please.
Thank you, Councillor Arshad. Councillor Mark Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comparison to begin with energy and farming. Over the last couple of decades, what we've done is decimated our natural energy sources in this country and become heavily dependent on European energy, Canadian wood pellets for the existing plants that we've got left, and therefore we've got an escalation in price as far as energy is concerned. So what could happen is exactly the same in our food industry, where we only produce just under 70% of our own food in this country. If we carry on doing what the plan is, then we could decimate our farming industry in this country. And therefore we'll be at the mercy of whoever in Europe and further afield as far as our as far as our food industry is concerned. The next thing is reference to farmers and what they do. I mean, we've talked tonight, in fact, about our local heroes in certain departments within council, what they do, how they go above and beyond. What's never really talked about is the farmers that work 7 days a week, 18, 20 hours a day sometimes, making sure that the land and the animals are well kept. For who? Well, for us, basically, for us. The working population of this country depend on them heavily, and at this moment in time they should be able to depend on us. Talking about taxing the wealth or the distribution of their assets once they pass away is quite a ludicrous concept as far as I'm concerned. It's not like any other industry. The farmers that I know, generational farmers, from great-granddad to granddad to father to sons generally, and they're all well-educated individuals, university students that understand the land, understand animal husbandry, understand the diversity of what they need to do with the land. And we're stood here debating whether to take some of that off them. We're sat here debating whether we should allow part of their land to be taxed and probably taken away for what? It almost sounds Orwellian that we're even considering this. For those of you that are not sure what I mean, is that it's one of the first things that's attacked in a socialist state is the farming communities. It's usually the thing that wants to be taken under the control of the state. And it almost sounds like that. I know that it probably isn't. It's just another land grab or tax that's easy coming. But we've got to move against things like this. We've got to look after the people that work like the backbone of this country for us. And we can't allow things like this to happen. Politics aside, we'll all suffer if we allow this to go forward. We'll all suffer, not just a party or a group of individuals, everybody in this country. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Safdar, please.
Madam Mayor, to pay this new inheritance tax bill, many farmers will be forced to sell their farms, likely to private equity firms and large corporations, corporations who have no interest in looking after our countryside. And the profits they may well make will be spent abroad, not benefiting local businesses and local villages. This isn't fair to hard-working farmers and families, many of which barely earn the minimum wage after paying for feed, vet bills, rising energy costs, and the increasing servicing costs for agricultural equipment. Recently, we saw so many farmers across this region muck in with community volunteers to help clear roads and paths in local villages, often miles away from their farms. So they weren't serving themselves, they were going above and beyond. I saw some farmers helping clear paths near local schools. So farmers deserve our respect. I'm also the son of a farmer, but This doesn't affect me personally, but it's going to affect our children and our children's children, because we must be growing food here in Britain. We cannot continue importing expensive food from abroad. So in the long term, such moves of this awful family farm tax is going to reduce food production and undermine food security. It will harm our environment, and it will take land away from those experienced farmers and families who've nurtured it for generations. Now, according to a number of reputable journalists, the Labour government surprisingly did not consult on these plans and did not speak to the Treasury even, and ignored DEFRA's advice, who urged these proposals to be watered down. I don't often agree with Councillor Taylor's, he's a hard-working councillor, I've got a lot of respect for him, but I don't often agree with Councillor Taylor's viewpoints. But when it comes to this motion, we must have no choice but to agree. All members should do as much as possible to support farmers wherever they may be. They deserve our respect.
Thank you. Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the son of a farmer in this country, I have a very great insight to this. Whilst I say I was born on a farm, I wasn't actually. I was born in a hospital, but they took me home to live on a farm. My formative years are spent working on farms with my school colleagues. I've done haymaking, all sorts of other things. Some of you won't remember this, but we used to do what we call tatey picking in the October half term. So I do have a genuine insight into this. And I can assure you that, yes, farmers have my total respect. As I say, I grew up with them. I still know quite a lot of them. But we need to be clear. There's a line to be drawn here. There are some farmers who don't work 7 days a week, because if you're an arable farmer, your crop is now in the ground and you will not be working today. It's the hard-working dairy farmers, the sheep farmers who do the 6, 7 days a week, because they have animals to look after. But the huge swathes of the farming community don't work 7 days a week. We've got to have that line drawn that some, yes, absolutely, they work really, really hard. But those on arable, they don't do that many hours, because once it's in the ground, they don't have to do anything until it's harvest time. They spray it, perhaps, but they shouldn't even be spraying it because they use dodgy chemicals. The Institute of Fiscal Studies, and I quote the Institute of Fiscal Studies, which is, I believe, one of the finest organisations as far as economics in this country is concerned, and is independent and has a proven track record, clearly says some relatively simple tax planning will ensure that many farms worth considerably more than 2 million will not be liable for tax. So clever tax planning, you will not be liable for tax. So it's not going to raise a great deal. I mean, one figure I've seen is £115 million a year. What's been forgotten is in the budget, the government gave in excess of £500 million to farmers. So it's actually, they've got a net gain. They've got a net gain. And it's interesting that Councillor Hall says that we should be taxing people like sportsmen and TV commentators. That's what this is designed to do. Jeremy Clarkson said he did it to avoid tax. That's the whole point. Closing that loophole that he bought a farm and then went on and made several million pretending to run it for a TV programme. That's the sort of person that actually must pay tax in it. And so you're right, David, and that's people like Jeremy Clarkson must pay their fair share of tax.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Tony McGrath.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try. I've been advised to keep it short. So just a quick one. I think being a farmer isn't an occupation. It's a lifestyle passed down through generations, and it's not something that can be taught at school as easily as it is passed down. So I think the next generation of farmer comes from within the farming community, and they're going to parents are going to think twice about passing that on now to avoid paying tax that they won't be able to afford, so they'd be better sending them to school to do other things other than learning how to farm land. I'm from Netherton and represent Home Valley North, and on the border we have Hinchcliffe Farm Shop, Britain's oldest farm shop. And the beauty of going there is that you can buy local food from local farmers, helping the local economy. They are the cornerstone of community. They do clear grit, so they're not just rich people buying it for loopholes, but the majority of people that will be affected aren't those people. They're Charles Haig, who owns Haig's Farm Shop. They're the sons and daughters that want to keep things going, want to keep the cornerstone of our community going. And this, whilst might not be aimed at them, is going to affect them. And in our area, we don't have Jeremy Clarkson. We have real farmers with real livelihoods and with real generational heritage to pass down. And you're going to take it away from them in Kirklees. And this is Kirklees Council, not mid-Oxford. So if you can just keep that in mind when we're talking about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hanifa Darwan.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that not all farmers are Jeremy Clarkson, and they're not celebrities. They work extremely hard, and it's clear the government does not understand that family farms are not small farms, and that just because a farm is a valuable asset, it doesn't mean those who work in it are wealthy. And I would like everyone to vote for this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Darwan. There are no more speakers, so right of reply, Councillor Taylor.
Conscious time, Madam Mayor, so I'll try and keep this quite short. A number of people have mentioned tax planning, clever tax planning. Tax planning costs money. You're putting money in the pockets of tax lawyers and accountants, and it's money that lots of these farmers don't have. Because as somebody has mentioned already, the low earnings of farmers, they don't actually necessarily even get the minimum wage. The other point to mention is some of these farmers are tenant farmers. So people glibly talk about, well, they can sell some of their land. If you're a tenant farmer, you don't have any land to sell. But your farm can be worth more than £1 million just based on... So a combine harvester will cost you £500,000. A tractor will cost you £250,000. So you can easily get above £1 million for a tenant farmer who will be impacted by this but has no land to sell. The only thing he can sell is any animals he has or some of his equipment. And the other point, the only final point I'd make, again, there's been talk about what happens if this land gets sold and it's taken by large conglomerates. They're not going to be caring about our little villages and towns. They're not going to be turning out and clearing snow and helping out. And they also, it's not just about clearing snow and helping out, is it? Any village event you have, invariably the farms will be involved in some way, whether it's helping out or providing the land to hold that on. I think I'll leave it there, Madam Mayor, so we've got time to move to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. We will now go to the vote. Can we all use our consoles, please? That motion is carried. Okay. Is it? No one's changing, are they? No, that's carried. Yeah. Okay. Right. With that, my phone says it is now 9 p.m, so I'm going to end the meeting here. Can I just remind all members to take a Foster for Kirklees poster or leaflet? They are here at the front. Thank you, everyone, and good night. See you at the next one.